Welcome to the Extraordinary 10 podcast.
So let's start with a question. What if the ancient world wasn't a primitive prelude to our modern lives?
Okay.
What if it was a lost era of superior ambition? What if the dust of history is actually hiding a level of human potential we have literally forgotten how to access?
We are diving into a countdown that is going to fundamentally change your perspective on what human beings are capable of. This isn't just history, this is, a high-stakes investigation into the impossible.
And we have combed through the archives, the archaeological reports, the structural analyses, to bring you three, shattering revelations right off the top.
Revelation number 1, that humans were forging weapons from space metal, literal meteorites, thousands of years before the Iron Age even began.
Revelation number 2, that we once built what were essentially lasers out of fire and polished bronze to guide ships from, 30 miles away?
And Revelation number 3, that an entire civilization turned sheer willpower into stone, moving 12 tons of rock every single hour nonstop for 2 decades.
And here's our promise to you. By the end of this session, you will never look at the ancient world, or maybe even your own potential, the same way again.
We have a roadmap, and we are going to move fast. This is the Extraordinary 10. We're covering the impossible speed of the Great Pyramid at Fact 10.
But that is just the foundation. At Fact 9, we're looking at metallurgy that just shouldn't exist. King Tut's dagger from the stars. Then, Fact 8, the mystery of the invisible hanging gardens, a wonder that, might have been pure propaganda.
Then we'll move to Fact 7, the fallen god of Rhodes that became a tourist attraction in its own ruins. Fact 6, the lighthouse that turned fire into a precision instrument.
Fact 5, that takes us to the 36-foot god made of ivory and gold. And Fact 4 introduces the arsonist, who basically invented terrorism as performance art by burning down history itself.
Fact 3, the lost server farm of 20,000 scrolls found beneath Cologne. Fact 2, the stone joints that are tighter than a razor blade.
And finally, Fact 1, the blinding white immortal facade that once covered Giza.
All right, are you ready to see the world differently? Let's start the clock.
We're officially starting the clock.
You might think you know the basics of this subject, but the reality is so much bigger than you imagine. Let's start with the true scale. Fact number 10.
We are kicking off this countdown with what I call the 20-year sprint. We're talking about the Great Pyramid of Giza. Now, everyone knows it's big, everyone knows it's old, but the stat that actually breaks your brain isn't the size, it's the time.
Right. I think most of us have this vague idea of ancient construction. You picture like a grandfather laying the foundation and then his great-grandkids finishing the capstone 100 years later. It feels like a slow generational thing.
Exactly. That's the medieval cathedral model. You work on it for a bit, you run out of money, you pause for a war, and maybe you finish it 2 centuries later. But the evidence for the Great Pyramid suggests something totally different. This 6.5 million ton monster wasn't a drift, it was a blitz. It was finished in just 20 years.
20 years. That's shockingly fast. That's less than a standard mortgage. That's basically the career of a single project manager.
It's less than a single human generation. It corresponds to the reign of the Pharaoh Khufu. And when you look at the sources, the logistics required to hit that deadline, it starts to look less like construction and more like a mathematical impossibility.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because 6.5 million tons is one of those numbers that's just too big to really feel. It just sounds like a lot of rock. How do we wrap our heads around the daily reality of that?
Okay, we have to do the math. The sources break it down into the daily grind, and this is where it gets, frankly, terrifying. To place over 2 million massive limestone and granite blocks in that 20-year time frame, you have to keep a pace that just seems insane.
So if they're working 12-hour days?
No, assume 247. Even with shifts, you are looking at setting one massive stone block averaging about 2.5 tons every 2 minutes.
Every 2 minutes?
Non-stop, day and night, for 2 decades.
2 minutes? I can barely make a cup of coffee in 2 minutes. And you're telling me they were cutting, hauling, lifting, and setting a 2.5-ton rock, which is like, what, a large SUV every 120 seconds?
On average, yeah. It's this relentless conveyor belt of stone. And you have to visualize what that actually looked like. I think we have this sanitized view of the pyramids, quiet, majestic, sitting in the silence of the desert.
Yeah, like a postcard. Or a museum exhibit.
Yeah.
Very sterile.
You gotta tear that postcard up.
Yeah.
Standing at the base of that construction site, it would have been sensory overload, an industrial hellscape. First, the air. It wasn't clear. It would have been thick with limestone dust.
So you're literally breathing the mountain.
You're breathing the stone, The dust would turn the Egyptian sun into this hazy amber disk. It would coat everything, your skin, your eyes, your lungs, and then the sound. That's what the reports really emphasize. No engines, no beeping trucks, no jackhammers.
So quiet.
Louder, but a different kind of loud. It was primal. You'd hear the scraping of stone against stone, that grinding sound that sets your teeth on edge, and you'd hear rhythmic chanting.
Because they had to sync up, right? You can't just have guys pulling randomly on a rope.
Exactly. Physics dictates it. If you have 50 guys pulling a sled, they have to pull at the exact same millisecond to overcome static friction. So you just hear this deep rhythmic chant echoing off the stones. Heave, heave, and then the ground itself.
The ground is moving.
It would vibrate every time a massive block settled into place. Boom. It would be like this slow, steady heartbeat reverberating through your chest. 12 tons every hour. Boom, boom. It's a rhythm of production that is almost frightening.
And you mentioned day and night. They didn't stop.
The project didn't stop. The men swapped shifts, of course. At night, they'd light huge fires on the slopes. Imagine looking up at this half-finished geometric mountain, illuminated by torches, shadows dancing everywhere, crews just working by firelight. It was a 247 operation.
Okay, so this brings up the obvious question, the one everyone asks when you describe this. How? And specifically, who? Because when you hear 247 labor backbreaking, the immediate assumption is, well, it's slaves. Or aliens. But mostly slaves.
And that is the biggest myth we have to debunk right now. It wasn't aliens, and according to the best evidence we have, specifically from the excavations at the workers' village at Giza, it wasn't slaves.
Really? Because that's the Hollywood version, isn't it? The guy with the whip, the misery, let my people go, and all that.
The archaeology tells a completely different story. The excavations at the workers' village, this area they call the Wall of the Crow, have changed everything. For one, we found bakeries.
Bakeries, like for the workers.
Industrial-scale bakeries. I'm not talking about a little home oven. We found vats capable of producing thousands of loaves of bread daily. This implies a whole supply chain. Grain silos, millers, water carriers. It implies a state that is feeding an army.
That's a massive logistical operation just for lunch.
And it wasn't just bread. We found evidence of massive livestock pens. We analyzed the bones. These people were eating prime beef.
Beef. In ancient Egypt, that's a luxury. That's not common food.
Exactly. Sheep and goat were for everybody else. Beef was for the elite. Yet here are the workers consuming thousands of pounds of it. We found homes with fish bones and imported beer jars.
Imported beer. So they were having a premium cold one after a shift.
Essentially, yes. And even more telling, we found evidence of serious medical care. Skeletons with healed fractures. Now, if a slave breaks a leg in a forced labor camp, they aren't usually getting set, splinted, and healed. They're discarded. Here, we see clear breaks that were set by skilled doctors and allowed to heal fully.
So this was a job, a career.
It was a national project. Think of it less like a gulag and more like the Manhattan Project or the Apollo program. It was a human machine. Highly organized, skilled craftsmen who were fed, housed, and cared for because they were the most valuable asset the state had.
That actually makes it more impressive to me. You know, fear can only motivate you so much, but pride, being part of that human machine, that's powerful. It suggests a level of social organization that rivals anything we have today.
And the organization required was staggering. It wasn't just brute force, it was logistics.
Right, because you can't just throw 20,000 guys at a pile of rocks and hope a pyramid just happens. You'd have chaos.
Precisely. And the precision started at the very bottom. Before they laid a single block, they had to level the base. And we're talking about a 13-acre footprint.
13 acres. That's what, 10 football fields?
Roughly. And across that entire 13-acre base, the deviation from perfectly level is less than 2 centimeters.
2 centimeters. I've had contractors pave a driveway with more of a slope than that. How do you even do that without lasers?
Water. The sources suggest a network of trenches cut into the bedrock in a grid pattern. You fill them with water.
Oh, right, because water is always level.
Gravity does the work for you. You mark the water line, grain the trenches, and then you just chop the rock down to match that line. It's elegant, simple, and incredibly labor-intensive. But it creates a foundation that is functionally perfect.
That is genius. It's so low-tech but high concept.
And then, once you have the base, you have to go up. And this is where my brain starts to hurt. The ramps. Because as you go higher, the geometry fights you.
Right, I've seen the diagrams. Usually it's just a big long ramp going up one side.
But here's the engineering crisis with that.
Yeah.
If you build a straight ramp to the top of the pyramid at a grade, you can actually pull a stone up, say 7 or 8%. That ramp would have to be over a mile long.
A mile.
It would contain as much stone and material as the pyramid itself. You'd be building 2 pyramids just to build one. It just doesn't make any sense.
So they didn't use a straight ramp.
The current thinking, backed by some fascinating scans, leans toward a hybrid system. A shorter external ramp from the bottom third where most of the mass is, and then, and this is the wild part, an internal spiral ramp.
Like a corkscrew. Inside the pyramid?
Exactly. They were likely building tunnels inside the structure as they went up, literally inventing engineering solutions on the fly to solve the problem of altitude. It's like building a skyscraper and inventing the elevator while you're on the 20th floor because you realize the stairs are getting too long.
It's the sheer volume that I still can't get past. You gave us the block every 2 minutes stat, but is there another way to visualize the total amount of rock? 6.5 million tons is still just a number.
Let's try this analogy. It's one of my favorites from the research. Imagine every single house built in the United States over the last 50 years.
Every house in the whole country since, what, the 1970s?
Yes, suburbs, cities, rural, farmhouses, all of them. Now take every brick, every cinder block, every foundation stone from every single one of those houses.
Okay. I'm picturing a mountain of debris, a huge one.
And stack them in one place. That pile would approach the volume of stone moved at Giza in just 20 years.
That's insane. That is absolutely insane. You're talking about half a century of continental housing construction compressed into one spot and done by hand.
Or, if you want a vertical comparison, it's the equivalent of building a modern 40-story skyscraper.
We do that all the time, though. I see cranes everywhere.
We do. But now imagine building that 40-story skyscraper using only rope, wood, copper tools, and human muscle. No diesel engines, no electricity, no cranes, no steel cables.
Just people.
Just people. Organized human will. That was the only engine they had. The analysis shows they move roughly 12 tons of stone per hour, every hour, for 175,000 hours straight.
175,000 hours. You know, we talk about hustle culture today. This is something else entirely. It's a level of focus I don't think we can even comprehend.
And that leads to the organizational marvel of it all. You had specialized units,
Yeah.
stone cutters at the quarry, haulers on the ramps, masons on the face, surveyors checking the angles. It required project managers, scribes, and overseers coordinating this massive labor force. They were basically inventing the spreadsheet on papyrus.
It sounds like an army.
It was an army of construction. And this is where it gets really fascinating. You connect it to the bigger picture.
Which is,
The why.
yeah. Why do we struggle so much today? I mean, look at big infrastructure projects now. A new airport terminal takes a decade and goes billions over budget. We have supercomputers and diamond-tipped drills. They had copper chisels and, onions. What are we missing?
That is the philosophical takeaway from this, I think. The pyramid proves that human potential isn't really limited by technology.
It's not.
No, it's limited by collective will and unified purpose. We have all the tools, but we rarely have the unity. The ancient Egyptians had almost no tools, but they had absolute singular unity around the pharaoh and the concept of the afterlife.
So the technology wasn't the magic. The society was the magic.
Exactly. The real wonder isn't the stone. It's the society that could transform impossible ambition into eternal stone. It challenges us to ask, what could we build today with our technology if we actually had that same level of collective will?
That is a haunting thought. We could probably fix the climate, colonize Mars, and cure disease in, well, maybe 20 years.
If we had the will of the pyramid builders.
That foundation is mind-blowing, but it only scratches the surface. To really understand the scale of what we're dealing with, we have to look at fact number 9, which takes this concept into a completely different dimension.
Okay, let's now focus on fact number 9. We are moving deeper into our countdown. Let's dive into fact number 9.
And we are definitely getting into the territory of the truly bizarre now. When we started this countdown, we talked a lot about these massive engineering feats.
Pyramids, temples, yeah. Things you can see from miles away.
Exactly, architectural giants. But this entry, it's physically small. I mean, you could hold it in one hand.
But the story behind it is just massive, literally cosmic. We're heading back to 1925 to the Valley of the Kings in Egypt to look at an object that really just shouldn't exist.
It's probably the most famous archaeological dig in history, right? Howard Carter peering into Tutankhamun's tomb.
The boy king.
And let's be honest, everyone knows the greatest hits from that discovery. The golden death mask, the sarcophagus, just the sheer amount of gold. It's sensory overload.
It really is. I was reading Carter's original journals, and the way he talks about the glint of gold everywhere. It's easy to see how a smaller detail could get lost. But as he was unwrapping the pharaoh's mummy, layer by layer, past all the amulets and linens, he found something. It was tucked right into the wrappings, against the king's thigh.
A dagger. And at first glance, it fits right in. It's got this beautiful gold handle, a rock crystal pommel.
The sheath is gold too, with lilies and jackals on it. It's a work of art.
A masterpiece. But the decoration isn't the headline here, not really. It's the blade itself.
Because when they pulled this thing out in 1925, the archaeologists were just baffled. King Tut died around 1323 BCE. That's over 3,000 years ago.
Right.
And we all know what happens to iron. I mean, you leave a shovel out in the rain for a few months and it's covered in rust.
Oh, for sure. Iron is incredibly reactive with oxygen. So a blade in a tomb for 3 millennia, even a dry one, it should just be a pile of orange dust.
But it wasn't.
It was pristine. It hadn't rusted. It was still silvery and shiny.
That lack of corrosion was the first big clue that the chemistry of this metal was unusual.
It was a mystery for decades. I mean, it was the anomaly in the glass case. And you can't just, chip a piece off a pharaoh's dagger for pesting.
No, that would be a bad look.
A very bad look. Conservation is everything. But recently, science finally caught up. Researchers used a technique called X-ray fluorescence, or XRF.
And for anyone listening who hasn't spent time in the lab, XRF is great because it's non-destructive, right? You don't have to damage the artifact.
Exactly. Think of it like a chemical scanner. It reads the fingerprint of an object without touching it. They shoot high-energy X-rays at the blade, and the atoms in the metal get excited.
And then they sort of shout their ingredients back at the machine.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. And the ingredients list was startling. See, if you dig iron ore out of the ground here on Earth and smelt it, the metal is almost pure iron. Very little nickel.
Like under 4% usually.
Right, but the readout on Tut's dagger was, it was drastically different. The scanner just lit up. Nickel levels were nearly 11%.
11. And there was cobalt too, right?
Significant traces of cobalt. And in geology, that specific ratio high nickel, trace cobalt, that is a smoking gun.
It's the fingerprint.
It's the chemical fingerprint of meteoric iron. The metal in that blade did not come from a mine in Egypt. It didn't come from a mine anywhere on this planet.
Came from space. A rock that fell from the sky.
So King Tut, the most famous pharaoh, was basically buried with a space weapon.
Okay, but this is where the timeline gets messy.
It gets very messy. This is what historians call the Iron Age paradox.
Because we define these eras by the materials they used. The Stone Age, the Bronze Age.
And King Tut was firmly in the Bronze Age.
The whole Egyptian society ran on bronze. It's an alloy of copper and tin. Pretty easy to work with, relatively speaking.
It has a low melting point, about 1,000 degrees Celsius. You can get that with a good pottery kiln and some bellows.
But iron is a different beast entirely.
Completely different. To smelt iron, to get the metal out of the rock, you need temperatures over 1,500 degrees Celsius. That is incredibly hot.
That's the difference between a campfire and a blast furnace.
Exactly. And the furnaces they had back then, they physically couldn't get that hot. The technology wasn't there. So they couldn't process iron ore from the ground.
Which means an iron dagger in 1323 BCE is an anachronism. It just shouldn't exist.
By the standards of their technology, no. And yet, there it is, a perfectly crafted, high-quality iron blade.
So the meteorite part isn't just a cool fact. It's the solution to how they made it.
It's the only solution. They didn't smelt it. They couldn't. The meteorite was the metal. A pre-made, purified chunk of iron just dropped from the heavens.
But that doesn't mean it was easy to work with. I mean, you can't just melt it into a mold like bronze.
No, not at all. You have to hammer it. It's called cold forging. And meteoric iron is tough stuff. It's hard, but it's brittle because of all that nickel. If you hit it wrong, it just cracks.
So the person who made this was a master craftsman. This is not a standard procedure.
It was next level work. And that brings us to a really powerful analogy to understand how out of place this thing was. I want you to picture this.
Yeah.
Imagine you're a farmer in medieval Europe. You've got your plow, your ox, the whole deal. And one day you're digging in your field and you find an iPhone.
An iPhone. And what, 1400 AD?
Stick with me. You find this smooth glass and metal rectangle. You turn it over in your hands. You have no idea how to build it. You don't have electricity, silicon chips, none of it.
The technology to make it won't exist for another 500 years. To me, it's not technology, it's magic.
It's magic, but you can see it's valuable. It's shiny, it's hard, it's unlike anything you've ever seen. That's what meteoric iron was to the Egyptians. It was a smartphone in medieval times.
That really puts it in perspective. It wasn't just another metal. It had properties like hardness and durability that just shouldn't have existed for them yet.
It was centuries ahead of schedule, and they recognized it. They couldn't explain the atomic structure, but they knew intuitively the stuff was superior to everything else they had.
I want to try and get a sense of what this actually felt like. You know, we see these things behind glass in a museum. Let's break the glass in our minds for a second.
Let's do it.
Okay, so you're holding this dagger. You're the pharaoh, or maybe the craftsman. What's the first thing you notice?
The first thing would be the density, the weight.
It'd be heavier than a bronze dagger of the same size.
Oh, significantly. Iron is denser. It has this real heft to it. It feels substantial in your hand.
And the temperature, what about that?
It has very high thermal conductivity. So even in the Egyptian desert heat, if you pick this up from a table, the blade would feel cool to the touch. It holds a chill.
That cool, heavy alien feeling must have just added to the whole mystique.
Absolutely. And then there's the visual texture. If you look really, really close, I mean, with a microscope, you'd see a pattern on the surface. It's called a Widman-Stettin structure.
A Widman.
Say that again?
Widman-Stettin. It's a geometric pattern of these intersecting lines, like a very fine, crystalline cross-hatching. And that's not something the craftsman etched into it for decoration.
Yo! And that's the key. You cannot fake this pattern. These lines are the boundaries of metal crystals that only form when iron and nickel cool down. Extremely slowly.
And when you say slowly, what are we talking? Weeks?
We're
Years?
talking about it cooling by just a few degrees every million years.
Wow.
It can only happen deep inside the molten core of a planetoid or a huge asteroid as it cools in the vacuum of space over eons. You can't replicate that in a furnace on Earth.
So that pattern it's a timestamp. It's a certificate of authenticity signed by the cosmos.
It is. It says, I was made in the dark of space billions of years ago.
So you're holding this heavy, cool blade, and you're seeing these tiny lines that took millions of years to form before there was even life on Earth.
And don't forget the edge. It would be incredibly sharp. And unlike bronze, which is soft and can bend, this holds its edge. It's star metal. It stays sharp.
It's really not just a weapon, is it? It's a literal artifact from the solar system's history.
It's a frozen piece of the cosmos, forged in a star, cooled in an asteroid, hurled through the void, and then pulled from the sand to be placed in the hands of a king.
Which brings us to the why. Why this dagger? Why was it strapped to the pharaoh's thigh? It can't just be because it was a better weapon.
Definitely not. The Egyptians were incredibly intentional. We now know from linguistic analysis that they had a specific term for this metal. They called it baya in pet.
Which translates to what?
Literally iron from the sky, or metal from heaven.
So they knew. They didn't just think it was some weird rock they found.
The evidence strongly suggests they knew exactly where it came from. I mean, they would have seen meteorites, fireballs streaking across the sky, hitting the desert. They put two and two together.
That changes everything. It means they weren't just using a hard material, they were using a holy material.
Precisely. To the Egyptians, the sky was the realm of the gods. Ra, the sun god, traveled through it. So a rock that falls from that realm, that isn't just a rock, that is a direct gift.
It's like getting a care package from the gods themselves.
And a dagger is a symbol of power, of authority. For a pharaoh to have a weapon made of sky iron, it created a direct link between his earthly rule and the power of the cosmos.
It blends heavenly power with earthly rule, the ultimate symbol of legitimacy.
It says, I hold the weapon of the stars. And you have to remember who Tutankhamun was. He died young, maybe 19. He became king when he was just a child.
So this wasn't just for show, it was for protection.
A very potent form of protection. The Egyptians believed the afterlife was a dangerous journey. The Book of the Dead is full of gates to pass and demons to fight.
And if you're going to fight demons in the underworld,
You want the best weapon you can get. What's better than a blade literally made from the stuff of the heavens?
it's like bringing a lightsaber to a knife fight.
Basically, yes. It was buried with him to ensure that the stars themselves would protect him on his final journey.
You know, it really highlights how we tend to underestimate ancient cultures. We see them as primitive, but they were incredible observers. They saw things fall from the sky, they found the material, they realized it was special, and they revered it.
They were a civilization obsessed with alignment, aligning pyramids to the stars, temples to the sun. Their entire culture was looking up, so for an object to come down from there, that carried immense weight.
It really makes you think about our own relationship with the cosmos.
Mm-hmm.
We look at this and think, wow, space metal, how rare.
But here's where it gets, I guess, philosophical.
Go for it. What's the bigger picture?
We see that dagger as an anomaly, a piece of space in an earthly tomb. But modern science tells us something profound. The dagger isn't the only thing made of stardust in that tomb.
You mean the golden jewels?
I mean everything. King Tut himself was made of stardust. And so are you, so am I.
Okay, now we're getting into astrophysics. Connect the dots for us.
It's the truth of nucleosynthesis. The iron in that dagger came from a meteorite. But where did the iron atoms in the meteorite come from in the first place?
Not the Big Bang.
No. The Big Bang just gave us hydrogen and helium, mostly. Heavier elements like iron can only be created in one place: the insane heat and pressure inside the core of a massive star.
So every single atom of iron in the universe was forged inside a star.
Exactly. And when those stars die, explode as supernovas, they scatter that iron across the cosmos. Some of it clumped together to form that meteorite, some of it clumped together to form our planet.
Which means the iron in my own blood right now.
The iron in your hemoglobin, which is carrying oxygen to your brain as we speak, was forged in the exact same kind of stellar furnace as the iron in King Tut's dagger.
So the dagger and the king are basically made of the same stuff.
They're kin. We are all, quite literally, made of stardust. Pieces of the universe that have been raining down on this planet since the beginning.
That's a beautiful way to put it. We're children of the stars, holding pieces of infinity.
And the Egyptians, in their own way, they understood this. They didn't know about supernovas, but they intuited that heaven and earth weren't separate realms. They were interwoven.
Interwoven realities.
Yes. They knew that the material of the gods could be held in a human hand. That dagger is physical proof that we've never been separate from space. We've always been a part of it.
It's a reminder that we were working with space metal millennia before we launched a single rocket. We didn't need to go to space to touch the stars.
The stars came to us.
It really changes how you look at a museum exhibit. It's not just an old knife. It's a bridge between the human and the cosmic.
And a reminder that the ancients were not primitive. They were just operating with a different set of tools, but their observations, their philosophy, incredibly deep.
Well, speaking of things that blur the line between the physical world and maybe the imaginary.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
I've been talking about a dagger that is very, very real. We have it, we scanned it, but our next fact, it's a little more elusive.
That is putting it mildly.
We're moving from the cosmic certainty of the space dagger to a geographical mystery that has stumped historians for centuries.
We're going from a wonder you can touch to a wonder that, well, might not have been where we thought it was, or maybe not at all.
If you thought that was an outlier, wait until you hear this next one. Fact number 8 is where things get truly interesting.
We are moving deeper into our countdown. Let's dive into fact number 8.
And honestly, this entry it's the outlier. It's sort of the ghost of the list.
A ghost.
Yeah, we're looking at the only ancient wonder where the main debate isn't about how it was built, but if it was built at all.
We are talking about the Lost Gardens. Most people know them as the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. And usually when we do these deep dives, we have a site, we have ruins.
Something to point to.
Exactly. We have carbon dating, we can say that's it, right there.
Exactly right. If we talk about the pyramids, we can literally go and touch the stone. With the Lighthouse of Alexandria, we can find the blocks in the harbor. With the Hanging Gardens, well, we're basically investigating a 2,500-year-old cold case.
A cold case, I like that.
Because, and this is the key, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon likely weren't hanging, and they probably weren't in Babylon.
Wow, okay, that is a heavy disclaimer to start with. It feels a bit like finding out Santa Claus might be real, but he actually lives in Miami.
Something like that.
So our mission today is to act as what? Forensic historians. We need to unpack the legend, look at why the physical evidence is totally missing, and then get into this radical theory that shifts the entire map.
By 300 miles, yeah. And we have to talk about the engineering. We have to. Because if these things existed, they weren't just a garden. They were a machine. A biological machine that was designed to fight thermodynamics in the middle of a desert.
It's a biological machine. I love that. Okay, so let's start with the story that everyone learns in school. The official narrative, so to speak.
The textbook version.
Yeah. If you opened a history textbook in, say, 1990, what did it tell you?
Okay, so the traditional timeline, it drops us into the Neo-Babylonian Empire. We're talking roughly 600 BCE.
And we're in the city of Babylon, near modern-day Hilla in Iraq, the center of the world at that time.
The center of the known world, for sure.
Yeah.
And the man in charge is Nebuchadnezzar II.
Right. And sources usually paint him as this warrior king, the guy who destroyed the Temple of Solomon. He's not exactly known for having a soft side.
not at all. He's usually depicted as a conqueror with a very, very big sword.
Right.
He was a builder and a conqueror, absolutely. But the legend of the gardens is, it's surprisingly personal. It frames the entire project as a kind of diplomatic love letter.
A love letter.
Yeah, Nebuchadnezzar marries a Midas of Media, and it's all to seal this big political alliance.
Okay, let's set the geography here. Media, that's modern-day northwestern Iran. It's mountainous, it's green, it's cool.
It's lush. It's basically the Switzerland of the ancient Near East.
And then Midas arrives in Babylon. And Babylon is, I mean, it's impressive, right? Massive blue walls, a metropolis.
But it's geographically flat. It's a sun-baked floodplain. So it's brown, it's dusty, and it is incredibly hot.
So she basically goes from hiding in the Alps to living inside a clay oven.
That's a good way to put it. And the sources say Midas becomes depressed. She's just deeply homesick for the hills of her childhood. She misses the trees, the sound of water.
So Nebuchadnezzar, being the king of the world, decides, well, if you can't go to the mountains, I'll just build a mountain for you.
So that is the core of the legend. He constructs a man-made mountain of masonry, layers it with soil, and just plants an entire vertical forest on top of it.
Okay, before we go any further, we have to clear up the name. Hanging Gardens. I always pictured, hanging baskets like you'd see on someone's porch, but that's not right, is it?
No, that's a translation error. It comes from the Greek word kremastos, which doesn't mean dangling or suspended from ropes. It really means overhanging or terraced.
Ah, like a modern penthouse terrace.
Exactly. Or think of a ziggurat that's just covered in vegetation. It's all about layers stacking up and up and up.
So the image is set, a green mountain rising out of the desert. It sounds perfect, it's romantic, it's grand. But here is where things take a sharp turn.
This is the reality check, because for the last century, archaeologists have been tearing Babylon apart looking for this thing.
And when you say tearing apart, you mean it?
I mean digging massive trenches through the entire ancient city. And we aren't talking about amateur treasure hunters here.
No, this is serious work.
Right, we're talking about Robert Coldway, the famous German archaeologist who excavated Babylon for, nearly 20 years in the early 1900s.
Yeah.
This is the guy who found the foundations of the Tower of Babel.
He found the Ishtar Gate, the one with those incredible blue glazed bricks that are in Berlin now.
The very one. He mapped the palaces, he found everything.
But the gardens?
Nothing, not a trace. I mean, he found some thick walls in a vaulted structure, and he hoped it was the gardens. He really, really wanted it to be, but it turned out to be a storage warehouse.
For what?
For sesame oil and grain.
That is a massive letdown. Behold, the wonder of the world, the royal pantry.
Pretty much. And look, there's a huge structural problem with Babylon too. The whole city is made almost entirely of mud brick.
And a garden needs water, constant water.
Which is a, let's say, structural incompatibility.
Yeah, if I spray a hose on a mud wall for 10 years, I don't have a wall anymore. I have a pile of mud.
And that's the smoking gun of absence. Mud brick dissolves. If you irrigate a massive terraced structure in Babylon without some kind of advanced waterproofing, which we haven't found, the whole palace would literally melt into sludge.
And then there's the silence. Nebuchadnezzar was not a humble man. He put his name on everything.
He inscribed his name on the bricks of the streets. We have endless cuneiform tablets where he brags about his walls, his temples, his palaces, his victories.
Everything.
But in all of those records, not a single word about a garden.
That is really suspicious. It's like a modern billionaire building the Burj Khalifa and just never mentioning it on Instagram.
It makes no sense. The only people who wrote about the Hanging Gardens of Babylon were Greeks Brassus, Strabo, Diodorus Siculus.
And they were writing hundreds of years later.
And crucially, they had never even been there. They were reporting what we call historical telephone.
Rumors.
Just rumors passed down through soldiers and merchants. So what we have is a site that's empty, a king who is silent, and a bunch of Greek writers basically penning fan fictions centuries later.
It really points to the whole thing being a myth, doesn't it? Just a Greek fantasy about Oriental luxury.
And that was the consensus for a very long time. Historians just shrugged and said, it's a nice story. Until recently.
What changed?
Scholarship shifted. People stopped asking, where are the gardens in Babylon? And they started asking a better question. Did we get the city wrong?
And this brings us to Dr. Stephanie Daly from Oxford. She spent decades on this, right? Analyzing cuneiform texts.
She did. And she proposed the solution that, well, it fixes all the engineering and historical contradictions.
Which is?
Her theory is that the Hanging Gardens were real, but they were 300 miles north in Nineveh.
Nineveh. the capital of the Assyrian Empire.
The rivals to the Babylonians, the other superpower in the region. And this swaps our builder. It's not Nebuchadnezzar, it's the Assyrian king, Sennacherib.
Okay, but why would history confuse two major cities? That's like confusing New York and Boston.
Or London and Paris, yeah. But it happens more easily than you think, especially when you're translating across languages and centuries. But there's a specific reason here. When Sennacherib conquered the region, his people sometimes called Nineveh New Babylon. Or just Babylon, to assert their dominance.
Okay, so the Greeks hear stories about a great garden in Babylon, and they just assume it's the famous southern city, not the northern capital that was calling itself Babylon.
Precisely. It's a branding issue. And unlike Nebuchadnezzar, Sennacherib did leave records. He left these bas-relief carved stone panels that show his palace.
And what's on these panels?
Trees growing on roof terraces, stone colonnades supporting heavy loads. And this is crucial for the engineering debate complex irrigation systems. Sennacherib was an engineer king. He was obsessed with water.
Let's get into that engineering, because I was reading the source notes on this, and the analogy they used, it just stopped me in my tracks. It said building these gardens was like constructing a massive Amazon rainforest on the roof of a New York skyscraper using Bronze Age technology.
It's not an exaggeration. I mean, just think about the physics involved. The biggest challenge isn't the plants, it's the weight.
Soil is heavy.
Wet soil is incredibly heavy. A single cubic meter of wet soil weighs over a ton.
And in Babylon, they're building with baked mud. If you put a ton of wet dirt on a mud roof, you're going to be in the basement very, very quickly.
You are. But in Nineveh,
Yeah.
they had access to massive limestone quarries. Sennacherib's reliefs show them dragging these enormous stone blocks.
And stone can take that load.
Stone can take the load of a vertical garden. Mud brick cannot. So the materials in Nineveh fit the profile perfectly.
Okay, then you have the water problem. You're in a desert climate. That evaporation rate must be insane.
It's a constant battle against the sun. You need tens of thousands of gallons of water every single day, lifted to the very top of the structure.
And gravity is your enemy here. How do you lift a river 80 feet in the air without electric pumps?
This is maybe the most exciting technical detail of the whole Nineveh theory. The scripts mention a device using a great cylinder and spirals made of bronze.
Wait, that sounds like an Archimedes screw.
It's exactly an Archimedes screw, a helical surface inside a tube. You spin it, and it just carries water uphill. It's simple, brilliant physics.
But Archimedes wouldn't even be born for another 400 years.
Which suggests the Assyrians invented it first. Sennacherib actually describes casting these massive bronze spirals using a lost wax technique. This was cutting-edge stuff.
So they were mechanizing water flow centuries before we thought.
They weren't just using buckets on a rope, they had a continuous water lifting machine. And that explains how they could sustain the kind of lushness the legends describe. Without that screw, the gardens are dead in a week.
So you have the stone structure for the weight, you have the screw for the water, but how do you stop it from leaking everywhere? I mean, a waterfall on your roof seems like a bad idea.
Waterproofing, and this is another detail found in Nineveh, not Babylon. They used layers of reeds, bitumen, which is sort of a natural asphalt, and thick sheets of lead.
Lead sheeting.
Massive amounts of it. It created a totally impermeable membrane between the wet soil and the structural stone. It's basically the same principle we use in modern green roofs.
We just use plastic and rubber.
And they used lead and asphalt.
It's incredible,
Yeah.
the ambition of it all. But before we get too lost in the nuts and bolts, I just want to step back. I want to try to visualize this. Because if it existed, it must have been mind-bending.
Let's do it. If you're listening, close your eyes for a second.
Yeah, try to go there in your mind. Forget the museums, forget the dust. Imagine the structure as it was.
You have to start with the heat. You're standing on the Mesopotamian plain. It's, 110 degrees Fahrenheit. The air is full of dust. It's blindingly bright.
Everything is beige.
Beige and flat. And looming in front of you is this artificial mountain. It's clearly architectural, sharp angles of stone, but they're all softened by cascading greenery. It looks like an explosion of life.
You walk toward it, you step into its shadow, and immediately the temperature drops.
That's evaporative cooling, the original air conditioning.
Yeah.
The moisture in the air just sucks the heat out of the environment.
You start climbing the stone stairs, and the sound changes completely. The wind in the desert, it just hisses, but here you hear the roar of water.
Sluices and waterfalls crashing down from the upper levels. The air gets humid. It smells like damp earth and pine and all these flowering exotic plants that have been dragged from hundreds of miles away.
And you look up and you see actual trees, pomegranates, figs, pines growing out of the stone right above your head. It's a complete sensory contradiction.
Your brain knows you're in a desert, but your senses are telling you you're in a rainforest. And imagine the wildlife. Birds would have flocked to it.
It would have been a symphony of life in an otherwise dead landscape.
And when you reach the top, you look out. You see the heat waves shimmering off the desert floor for miles. But you are standing in a cool, lush paradise.
It's a flex.
It is the ultimate flex.
It's saying, I control the water, I control the stone, and I control biology.
Yeah, and that brings us to the philosophy of it all. Why even build it? The source mentions man versus nature, but it feels more aggressive than that.
It feels like a challenge.
I think it's order versus chaos. In the ancient Mesopotamian mindset, the wilderness was chaotic, it was dangerous, the desert was death. The king's job was to impose order.
So a garden isn't just pretty flowers, it's a statement of absolute control.
Precisely. It says, nature dictated a desert here, but I have the will, the technology, and the power to dictate a garden. It's an assertion of dominance. It's the king acting as a god.
And maybe that's why the story survived, even if the stones didn't. Even if the Greeks got the city wrong, they got the feeling of it right. They understood the audacity of the project.
I think that's why we refuse to let the story die. The Hanging Gardens represent this very specific, very human desire to terraform, and we're still doing it today.
We really are. Look at Singapore's gardens by the bay or the vertical forest towers in Milan. We're still trying to build green mountains inside our concrete jungles.
We are still trying to bring the green into the gray. The Hanging Gardens were just the first prototype of the eco-city. Sennacherib, or Nebuchadnezzar, was trying to solve the same problem we are.
How do we make our cities livable?
Exactly. It's a beautiful thought. The stones might be lost, maybe they're buried under Nineveh somewhere, but the concept itself is immortal.
It blooms eternally in our imagination.
And honestly, the mystery keeps it alive. If we found the ruins and it was just a pile of broken aqueducts and some lead sheets, it might lose some of its magic. As a lost wonder, it gets to remain perfect.
I want to leave everyone with a question then, based on that. What does it say about us that we need this to be real? Why do we find the idea of a garden in the desert so much more compelling than, say, a pyramid or a statue?
Maybe because a pyramid is a monument to death. It's a tomb, but a garden. A garden is a monument to life against all the odds. It's hope made out of leaves and water.
That is the mystery. And honestly, I kind of like that we don't know for sure. It keeps the wonder alive.
It does. It forces us to keep searching and keep digging.
Yeah.
And keep imagining.
Now let's take a second to process that. If that's possible, then the next revelation shouldn't surprise us, and yet it's one of the most debated mysteries in science. Shifting gears to fact number 7. Let's keep moving deeper into our countdown. Let's dive into fact number 7.
We are entering the territory of the truly colossal now.
I thought the last one was wild, but this next fact changed my entire perspective on what the ancient world was actually capable of. We are talking about the Colossus of Rhodes.
Right.
And I think for a lot of people, that name just conjures up a vague image of a big statue, maybe something out of a fantasy movie or a video game.
It often does,
Yeah.
but the reality is so much more visceral. We aren't just talking about a piece of art here. We're talking about a god made manifest in metal.
A god made manifest in metal. I love that. But before we get into the nuts and bolts, or I guess the bronze and iron of how this thing was built, I want to back up.
Good idea.
Because the source material highlights something I completely missed in history class. This statue didn't just appear because the Rhodians had some spare change and a big ego. It was born out of war.
It was. And that context is absolutely crucial. You can't understand the statue without understanding the Siege of Rhodes in 305 BCE.
Right. This is the part that feels like an action movie. You've got Demetrius Poliorcetes, which, by the way, incredible nickname. It literally means the besieger.
Chuckles. It is a great name.
He rolls up to the island with an army of 40,000 men. I mean, that was more than the entire population of Rhodes at the time.
It was a massive force. And Demetrius wasn't just, throwing rocks. He was a tech innovator of his day. He brought these massive siege engines.
The most famous one was the Helepolis, right? The city taker.
That's the one. This thing was a 9-story tall siege tower, plated in iron, filled with catapults. It took over 3,000 men just to move it.
It was basically a land-based aircraft carrier. Terrifying.
It was the ultimate weapon of the age. And yet, against all odds, Rhodes held out. They resisted for a full year.
Until a peace treaty was signed and Demetrius had to abandon the siege. And in his haste to leave, he left something behind.
He left the Helepolis, he left the giant siege tower, and tons of other equipment, bronze armor, weaponry.
And here is where the irony just drips off the page. The Rhodians took this machine of war, this thing designed to destroy them, and they stripped it down.
They melted the bronze, sold the iron, and used all that money to build a statue of their patron god, Helios, the sun.
That is the most poetic core of the Colossus, I think. It wasn't just, look how rich we are, it was, we survived.
Exactly. Every single inch of that statue was literally made from the weapons of their enemies. It was a transformation of violence into divinity.
Which is such a massive flex. It's like, thanks for the metal, we're going to build a god with it now.
Pretty much.
So fast forward to around 280 BCE. The project is finished. I want to set the scene for you, our listener. You're a sailor arriving in Rhodes. What do you see?
Well, first we have to talk about what you don't see, because pop culture has kind of lied to us.
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. The whole Game of Thrones image. The Titan of Bravos?
Exactly. The image of a giant statue straddling the harbor entrance, 1 foot on either side, with ships sailing between his legs.
It looks amazing in paintings. It looks great on TV.
It does. But historically and, well, physically, it's nonsense.
Yeah, I dug into this because I really wanted it to be true. But if you think about it for just 5 seconds, the logistics completely fall apart.
The harbor entrance was wide. For him to straddle it, he would have needed legs that were just unnaturally long, or he'd have been doing the splits.
Plus, the construction would have blocked the harbor for 12 years, and Rhodes was a major trading hub.
You can't just close the port to build a statue. It would be like shutting down JFK Airport to build a sculpture on the runway. It just wouldn't happen.
So no straddling, but that doesn't make it any less impressive. The consensus seems to be that he stood on a pedestal near the harbor entrance, or maybe slightly inland, looking out to sea.
Correct. And even without the straddle, the experience of arriving there must have been overwhelming. The sources describe it catching the light like a second sun.
That's the detail that sticks with me. He wasn't that dull green patina we see on old statues now. He was burnished bronze, maybe even gilded.
It's likely parts of him were gilded, especially the rays of his crown. You have to imagine you're exhausted from weeks at sea. The Mediterranean sun is beating down.
And then on the horizon,
Hours before you even see the city, you see a star burning on the water.
it's almost like a lighthouse, but it's a person. And as you get closer, the scale just starts to break your brain. We're talking 30 meters high, about 100 feet.
Which, in modern terms, is a 10-story building. But again, context matters. In the ancient world, nothing was that tall except maybe the pyramids. To see a human form that tall, it was unheard of.
And the details were just terrifying. The face the size of a house, fingers that could crush a man.
The psychological impact on sailors, dropping to their knees, feeling totally insignificant, it was by design.
Absolutely. It was a statement of power. We are the Rhodians. We defeated the besieger. We built the sun.
It was a welcome, sure, you were arriving at a safe harbor, but you were also being warned.
My guard dog is a 10-story bronze sun god.
Precisely. But this is where we have to get into the weeds of the engineering, because building a 10-story building is hard. Building a 10-story man out of metal plates in 280 BCE, that's basically witchcraft.
This is the part that blows my mind. No cranes, no hydraulics, no computer modeling, and the sculptor, Chairs of Lindos, he wasn't just pouring a giant mold, right?
No, impossible. You can't cast a 100-foot statue in one piece. The physics just wouldn't allow it. It would collapse under its own weight before it even cooled.
So what did he do?
He essentially invented a form of construction that we wouldn't see again until the Statue of Liberty.
The Statue of Liberty. Okay, let's break down that comparison, because I think most people assume these statues are solid metal, like a toy soldier.
Right. If the Colossus were solid bronze, it would have cost more than the entire island was worth. And it would have been so heavy it would just sunk into the bedrock. It had to be a shell.
Sure.
Exactly. A skin. Chairs used an internal framework, a skeleton. They drilled these iron bars into the stone blocks of the pedestal and built a central column of stone and iron rising up through the legs and the body.
So the bones were stone and iron.
Yes. And then the skin was attached to that skeleton. Now, there's some debate on the exact technique. Some sources suggest they cast these curved bronze plates. Others think it was hammering sheets of bronze into shape.
But either way, imagine the risk. The source mentions that Chairs was working at the bleeding edge of physics. One miscalculation.
One weak joint, One mistake on the load-bearing capacity of those iron bars, and the whole thing just snaps.
And what about the wind? A 100-foot surface area must have acted like a massive sail.
A huge sail. The internal structure had to be flexible enough to sway just slightly, or the wind would have torn it apart.
So how did they actually get up there? They didn't have scaffolding that could reach that high safely, did they?
Well, this is the most fascinating theory in the texts, the earth mound theory. The idea is that as the statue grew, they buried it.
Wait, they buried it?
They built a massive earthen ramp or mound around it. So as they finished the ankles, they'd pile dirt up to the ankles. Then they would stand on that dirt to build the shins, pile more dirt to the knees.
So for 12 years, the people of Rhodes didn't see a statue. They just saw a growing hill of dirt.
Exactly. It was a construction site hidden inside an artificial mountain. The artisans were working in a pit at the top of the mound, casting and hammering the next level up.
That seems incredibly dangerous if that dirt shifts or if the statue inside becomes unstable.
It was immensely dangerous. There's a legend that Chares eventually committed suicide before it was finished because of a flaw he discovered, though that's probably not true. But the pressure must have been unimaginable.
And then the reveal.
Imagine that day, the day they started digging.
Taking away the dirt, cartload by cartload, and revealing the golden head, then the shoulders, then the chest.
It must have felt like an archaeological excavation, but it's something brand new.
And it worked. It stood there. It dominated the skyline.
For a while.
Yeah. And this is the twist. This is the tragic part of the story. Because when we think of ancient wonders, we think of permanence. The pyramids are still there, but the Colossus, it was a blink of an eye.
54 years. That's it.
That really stuck out to me. 54 years. That's a single human lifetime. If you were born the day it was finished, you'd watch it fall before you died of old age.
The earthquake of 226 BCE. It was a catastrophe for the whole region. It shattered the city, wrecked the harbor walls, and for the Colossus. Well, the physics finally won.
But I have to play devil's advocate here. If a modern architect built a skyscraper and it fell down 50 years later, we wouldn't call it a wonder, we'd call it a disaster. We'd sue them.
That is a harsh but fair question. Structurally, yes, it failed. It snapped at the knees, which makes sense. That's the stress point.
So does Chares really deserve the credit if it failed so quickly?
I'd argue yes, because of the ambition. Nobody had ever tried this before. Yeah. He was operating without a manual, without any precedent.
He was the test pilot.
Yeah.
And the plane crashed.
Exactly. But the plane flew for 54 years, and nobody had ever seen anything like it.
Fair point. So the statue comes crashing down. It must have sounded like the end of the world. A mountain of bronze hitting the ground.
It would have been deafening. And just like that, the second sun was extinguished.
But this is where the story gets really weird. Because usually when a monument falls, you clear the rubble or you rebuild it, and they had the chance.
You did. Ptolemy III of Egypt, a huge ally of Rhodes, offered to pay for the entire reconstruction. He literally wrote a blank check.
So why didn't they? I mean, who turns down a free god?
The Rhodians consulted the Oracle of Delphi,
Of course.
and the Oracle gave a very specific, very ominous warning. She said that rebuilding the statue might offend Helios.
Offend him.
The implication was that perhaps the statue had fallen because Helios didn't like it. Maybe he was too proud. Maybe it was an affront to his divinity.
That is such a fascinating pivot in mindset. One minute it's, we built a god to honor him, and the next it's, oh no, he pushed it over because he hates it.
Fear is a powerful motivator. So the Rhodians decided to leave it exactly where it fell
So it just lay there.
for roughly 800 years.
That is the part of this deep dive that I found the most poetic. We talk about the Colossus as a wonder when it was standing, but the source makes this incredible point. It was maybe even more famous as a ruin.
It became a tourist attraction of the ancient world. Pliny the Elder wrote about visiting it in the 1st century AD, hundreds of years after it fell.
And the visualization here is just haunting. Imagine walking through that landscape. It's no longer a statue, it's a terrain. The text describes the limbs scattered like fallen mountains.
And there was this famous thumb test mentioned in the historical accounts.
The thumb test.
Yes. The guys would challenge visitors to try and wrap their arms around just the thumb of the fallen statue.
Just the thumb?
Just the thumb. And Pliny says that very few men could make their fingers meet. That gives you a sense of the sheer girth of this thing.
I love the image of children playing in the ruins. The source mentions kids running in the shadow of the head or climbing inside the broken limbs.
It speaks to the tactile nature of it. When it was standing, it was a god distant high above you. When it fell, it became something you could touch.
Right.
You could put your hand on the bronze and feel the warmth of the sun stored in the metal.
Like it was still alive.
In a way, it was. The text describes the wind whistling through the hollow cavities where the iron beams had snapped. It made a sound. It had a voice.
That is spooky and beautiful. It's like a dead god singing.
And birds nesting in the crown. It became part of the ecosystem. It wasn't a building anymore. It was a landscape.
It really challenges our idea of what a monument is. Does a monument have to be perfect and standing to be powerful?
That's the core philosophical question here. I think the Colossus proves the answer is no. In fact, its brokenness added a layer of awe that perfection couldn't achieve.
When you see a standing statue, you admire the art.
Exactly. When you see a fallen giant, you feel the weight of time.
It's Ozymandias in real life. Look on my works, ye mighty, in despair.
Precisely. And for 800 years it lay there. That is a long time. That's longer than the Roman Empire lasted in the West. It was just part of the city.
Meet me by the giant hand, or let's go have lunch by the broken knee.
Exactly. But nothing lasts forever. Not even ruins.
And eventually, the metal became too valuable to just leave on the ground.
This is where the romance ends and the economics begin.
Right. We move to the 7th century CE. The Arab forces under Muawiyah I conquer Rhodes. And they don't look at this pile of bronze and see a fallen god or a tourist attraction.
They see a resource. They see strategic assets. So they broke up the statue, chopping at the limbs, melting down the plates.
And the scale of that operation. The source mentions a Jewish merchant from Edessa who bought the scrap, and the legend says he needed 900 camels to carry it all away.
Now, whether it was exactly 900 is debatable, but let's just think about the logistics of that. A camel trained of 900 animals, that stretches for miles.
It's a massive industrial operation. It's not just a guy with a cart. It's a caravan of dismembered god walking into the desert.
And disappearing into coins or weapons or tools. The Colossus was recycled back into the mundane world from which it came.
Which is kind of full circle, right? It started as weapons of war, the siege tower. It became a god, and then it likely became weapons or coins again.
It highlights the transience of form. The metal persists, but the meaning changes.
So today, there's nothing left. Not a toe, not a finger.
Nothing physical. We have coins from Rhodes that show what it looked like, a sun god with a rayed crown. We have these descriptions from Strabo and Pliny. But the bronze itself is gone.
And yet, here we are, 2,000 years later, and we're talking about it.
That is the paradox of the Colossus.
Right. And I want to get into that philosophical deep dive because the expert analysis raises this really haunting question. If something is more memorable in death than in life, what makes it immortal?
It's a question of legacy. As we said, it stood for 54 years. In the grand scheme of history, that's a blip. If it had been just a regular statue, it would have been forgotten immediately after it fell.
But because it was so audacious.
Because of the audacity. The Colossus didn't need to survive to triumph. Its purpose was to prove that human beings could take raw earth metal and stone and shape it into something divine.
It was the attempt that mattered.
Precisely. The text has this beautiful line, "Reaching for divinity, even if we fall, is the most human thing we can do."
That gives me chills. It implies that failure isn't the opposite of success here. The statue fell, yes, but the fact that they built it at all, that is the victory.
Think about the mindset of Chairs of Lindos. He knew he was pushing the limits. He knew the risks. He wasn't playing it safe. He was reaching for the impossible.
And even though it broke, the memory of that reach is what survived.
We don't remember the cautious builders. We don't remember the people who built safe one-story huts that lasted forever. We remember the people who tried to build the sun.
It makes me think about modern projects. We still build massive skyscrapers. We build the Burj Khalifa. But do we build them with that same sense of spiritual ambition?
That's the question. The Colossus wasn't an office building. It wasn't for profit. It was a celebration of survival. It was an emotional pouring out of a city's soul into bronze.
And maybe that's why we still care. It wasn't just engineering, it was emotion.
It was art on a mountain scale.
Mm-hmm.
And art is fragile.
So if you could go back, hypothetically, would you visit it when it was standing? Or would you visit the ruins?
Oh, that is a difficult question.
Right. Because seeing it standing, seeing the sun glint off that crown, that would be life-changing.
It would be awe-inspiring in the literal sense of the word. Terror and beauty. But I think I would choose the ruins.
Really? Why?
Because of that tactile connection we talked about. To walk up to the hand lying in the dust. To touch the finger that was meant to crush men and see that it had been brought low.
To sit in the shade of a fallen god and eat your lunch.
Exactly. There's a profound humility in that experience that I think I would value more than the shock and awe of the standing figure.
I think I'm with you. There's something about the silence of the ruins. It feels like you're closer to the truth of things, the truth that everything falls.
But also the truth that the story remains.
Before it becomes camels and coins.
Before it becomes camels and coins.
But the memory doesn't. And that's what we are doing here. We are keeping the memory of the Colossus alive just by speaking about it.
Stories last longer than bronze.
That is a fantastic point to end on. It really is the ultimate lesson of the ancient wonders. Stone cracks, metal corrodes, but the idea. That is the only thing that is truly indestructible.
Well said.
So looking at the big picture of this countdown, the Colossus sits at this weird intersection of war, art, and failure.
It does. It reminds us to swing for the fences. Even if you strike out after 54 years.
Yeah.
Better to stand as a god for 54 years than as a pebble for an eternity.
Damn, that's good. I might steal that.
Please do.
Well, we have lingered in the ruins long enough. We need to shake the dust off our sandals.
The list waits for no one.
It certainly doesn't. And honestly, looking at my notes for the next one, it is a complete 180 from where we just were.
Oh, absolutely. We are leaving the world of bronze and heavy metal.
We're halfway through, and a pattern is starting to emerge. But fact number 6 pulls back the curtain on a secret that most people walk past every single day without ever noticing.
And here we are, one step closer to fact number 1. Let's dive into fact number 6.
We are definitely getting into the heavy hitters now. This isn't just about, big rocks or mysterious daggers anymore. Today, we're looking at something that honestly feels like science fiction for its time.
We are talking about the Lighthouse of Alexandria, or as the cool kids in the ancient world called it, the Pharos.
Right. And I think when most people hear ancient lighthouses, they have a very specific, and let's be honest, kind of underwhelming image in their heads.
Yeah, I definitely picture something quaint. Like a rustic stone tower on a cliff. Maybe a guy named Steve throwing a log on a bonfire every hour or so. Feels very cozy.
Very low tech.
Exactly.
And that image is completely wrong. If you take one thing away from this deep dive, let it be this. The Pharos wasn't just a tower with a fire. It was a machine. It was a precision instrument of ancient navigation that used, advanced optics to turn raw light into a signal that could cut through 30 miles of darkness.
That is the part that blows my mind.
Yeah.
We were talking about a beam of light, something you could see from the horizon long before electricity, light bulbs, or modern lenses. This was a directional spotlight built centuries before the concept should have even existed.
It really is. It's a story about engineering that was way ahead of its theoretical time. We're going to look at how they built it, the almost magical mirror technology at the heart of it, and maybe the philosophy behind why humans feel compelled to build lights in the dark.
Okay, so let's start with just the physical presence of this thing, because you can't have a lighthouse without a house, right?
Yeah.
And this wasn't just any house.
No, house implies something you could, live in. This was a skyscraper. The Lighthouse of Alexandria was built on this small island, Pharos, right off the coast of Alexandria, Egypt. And in terms of scale, it was just absolutely massive. Estimates put it somewhere between 100 and 130 meters tall.
Okay, hold on. Let's unpack that for a second.
Yeah.
130 meters, that is, roughly 420 feet?
Yep.
That is a 40-story building?
In a world where most buildings were 1 or 2 stories tall, for centuries, this was one of the tallest man-made structures on the entire planet. The only thing that really rivaled it were the Great Pyramids themselves.
So that's nearly the height of the Great Pyramid of Giza. Can you imagine sailing into a harbor and seeing a skyscraper that rivals the pyramids?
And unlike the pyramids, which were tombs, essentially solid mountains of stone, this was a functional building. It had rooms, mechanics, windows, and a real industrial purpose.
And it wasn't just a big block, right? It had style. It had this very specific shape that basically became the blueprint for lighthouses for thousands of years.
It did. It was designed in 3 distinct tiers, kind of like a wedding cake, but, made of massive stone blocks. The bottom section was a broad square base that gave it the stability to withstand coastal winds and, importantly, earthquakes.
Right, because Alexandria is in an earthquake zone.
Exactly. You can't just build a needle straight up. It'll snap. You need that wide base. Then on top of that square base, you had a narrower middle section, which was octagonal.
An octagon. Why an octagon? Was that just for looks?
It's aerodynamic. A flat wall gets hammered by the wind. It creates pressure. An octagon sort of deflects the wind around the structure. It reduces the stress on the whole thing.
That is incredibly smart. And then topping it all off.
A small circular tower. And then crowning the entire thing was a statue, probably Zeus or Poseidon, a god standing at the very peak, looking out over the Mediterranean.
It's such a power move. You're sailing into Alexandria, the intellectual capital of the world, and the first thing you see is a 40-story tower, topped by a literal god.
But I'm interested in the guts of the building. How did they get the fuel up there? I mean, 400 feet is a lot of stairs to carry a bundle of wood.
Oh, it was a logistical marvel on the inside, too. The interior had this gentle, spiraling ramp, essentially a roadway inside the tower. Beasts of burden, like donkeys or mules, could actually walk up the ramp carrying the fuel, wood, or oil all the way to the fire chamber near the top.
So it was a living workplace. It wasn't just a monument. It was a factory for light. Precisely. You have to imagine the noise, the smell of the animals, the constant traffic of fuel going up and waste coming down. It was an industrial operation running 24/7.
And speaking of fuel, Alexandria is on the edge of a desert. Wood isn't exactly just lying around.
That's a huge point. The logistical tail of this thing was an economy in itself. They had to import massive amounts of wood or use oil reserves. Some theories even suggest they used dried animal dung for bulk burning. Just keeping the light on required a whole supply chain.
With the height and the ramps, that's just architecture. That's just stacking stones very, very high. The real magic, the thing that makes this fact number 6, is what sat inside that top chamber.
The ancient laser.
I love that we're calling it that.
It's a bit of an exaggeration, but you know what? Not by much. This is where we get into the optics. Because a fire by itself, even a big one, isn't actually that bright from a distance.
Explain that. Because bonfires seem pretty bright to me.
Up close, yeah, sure. But light obeys the inverse square law. As you double the distance from the source, the intensity drops to 1/4. It scatters, it diffuses. If you're 30 miles out at sea, a bonfire just looks like a dull orange smudge if you can even see it at all.
Right, it creates a glow, not a beam.
Exactly. To get a beam, you need to focus the light. You have to stop it from scattering. And that is what the Pharos did. Ancient accounts describe a massive reflective device positioned behind the light source.
A mirror.
Yes, most likely a colossal mirror made of polished bronze.
I love the idea of bronze here. We aren't talking about glass mirrors with silver backing like we have in bathrooms today. This was metal.
Right, speculum metal.
Yeah.
And it had to be polished to such an incredible sheen that it became a perfect reflector.
Which implies there was probably a guy whose entire job was just polishing this thing.
Oh, absolutely. Bronze oxidizes, it gets dull, especially in salty sea air. If that mirror gets dull, the beam dies. So there was constant maintenance involved.
And it worked in 2 modes, right? During the day, they didn't even need a fire.
Correct. The mirror was positioned to catch the sun. It would reflect this blinding beam of sunlight out to sea, flashing signals to approaching ships. It was basically a heliograph signaling with the sun.
And then at night.
At night, the fire took over. The mirror would catch the glow of the flames and concentrate it. It took all of that scattering light and forced it into a single direction. It turned a fire into a projector.
The sources mention the range on this thing, and it is just staggering.
It is. We're talking about visibility roughly 30 to 50 kilometers out. That's 18 to 30 miles. Now, there are legends that claim 100 miles, which is probably physically impossible because of the curvature of the Earth.
Right, because the Earth literally curves away from you.
Exactly. At sea level, the horizon is only about 3 miles away. To see something 30 miles away, the object has to be incredibly tall, and the light has to be incredibly intense.
Just think about that. You were 30 miles away from land. You were in the middle of nowhere, and you can see a light that was man-made.
It effectively expanded the safety zone of the harbor by a magnitude of 10. It was a technological leap that changed maritime travel in the region. It turned Alexandria into a 24-hour port.
But here is where things take a sharp turn.
And this is the part that keeps historians and scientists up at night, the intuitive engineering of it all.
Because, if I'm not mistaken, these guys didn't have the math for this, did they?
They absolutely did not have the physics textbooks we have today. To build a mirror that can focus light into a tight beam over 30 miles, you need to understand parabolic reflection.
Okay, lay that on me. What is parabolic reflection?
So if you use a flat mirror, the light just bounces off at whatever angle it hit. If you use a simple round, like a spherical mirror, the light scatters everywhere. But if you curve the mirror in a parabola, a very specific geometric shape, all the light rays bounce off and come out parallel to each other.
Like a laser.
Exactly, or a modern searchlight. That's called collimated light.
And this was, what, 3rd century BCE?
Right. They didn't have the wave equations. They didn't have Maxwell's equations describing electromagnetism. This wasn't theoretical science. It was pure empirical genius.
It's like inventing the telescope before you know why glass bends light.
That is the perfect analogy. They must have figured it out through trial and error, through just pure observation. We have to remember, Alexandria was home to the great library. Euclid, the father of geometry, lived there. Archimedes spent time there.
So the intellectual raw material was definitely there.
Yes, but there's a huge gap between drawing a parabola on a scroll and hammering a massive sheet of bronze into that exact shape. That is manufacturing genius.
And the stakes were just huge. If they got the curve slightly wrong or the angle off by a fraction of a degree,
The light scatters, it becomes a dim glow again, the whole project fails. To achieve that kind of precision, creating a focused beam without the mathematical formulas to describe it, is frankly unbelievable. They built a machine that worked based on principles that wouldn't be formally described for another 1,500 years.
it really highlights the difference between knowing how and knowing why. They didn't know why the parabolic curve worked, the wave physics of it, but they absolutely knew how to build it.
For the people using it, the why didn't matter at all. All that mattered was the result.
Which brings us to the experience of the user. Because we can talk about bronze mirrors and focal points all day, but the real impact of this thing was emotional.
It was visceral. It changed the psychology of sailing.
So I want you to picture this. You're a sailor in the 3rd century BCE. You're on a wooden ship crossing the Mediterranean. No GPS, no radar, no radio.
You're navigating by the stars and by dead reckoning, which is basically just a fancy term for guessing where you are based on your speed and time.
And you've been at sea for weeks. Maybe you've hit storms. Your supplies are running low. The water in the barrels is turning green. The crew is getting restless.
And it's night, the kind of dark we don't really experience anymore because of light pollution. I'm talking absolute suffocating blackness. You can't even see the water. You can only hear it slapping against the hull.
The stars are blurring together because you're so tired. You're terrified of sailing off course. Or worse, hitting a shoal rocks hidden just under the surface and just ripping the bottom out of your boat.
That fear was a constant companion for ancient sailors. The sea was this hostile, chaotic place.
And then you look at the horizon and you see it.
A pinprick.
A tiny, steady star where no star should be. It's too low to be a planet. It's not flickering like a campfire on a beach. It's sharp. It's bright.
And as you sail toward it, it doesn't just get bigger, it gets more focused. The source describes it beautifully, like a finger pointing directly at you.
That feeling, I can't even imagine the relief. It's not just navigation, it's a message.
It is. It's a handshake from the shore. It says,
Yeah.
Civilization is here, we are here, you are not alone in the void.
Someone built this massive machine, polished this giant mirror, and dragged fuel up a 400-foot ramp all night long, specifically so you wouldn't die in the dark.
That connection between the engineer in the tower and the sailor on the water is so profound. It transforms the ocean from a place of terror into a place of connection. It basically tamed the night.
So what happened to it? I mean, I've seen pictures of Alexandria today. There is no 40-story lighthouse there.
Sadly, nature reclaimed it. The region is seismically active. The lighthouse stood for well over 1,000 years, which is just an incredible run.
That's longer than the Roman Empire lasted.
It is. Most modern skyscrapers aren't designed to last anywhere near that long. But it was battered by major earthquakes in 956, 1303, and then finally in 1323 CE.
So it was a slow death then, not one big event.
It was progressively damaged. The top fell, then the middle. By the 14th century, it was essentially a ruin.
And like so many ancient wonders, it was recycled.
Exactly. In the ancient world, you don't leave good pre-cut stone lying around. Later builders, specifically the Sultan Qaitbay in the 1400s, used the massive blocks to build the citadel of Qaitbay, a fortress that still stands on the site today.
So if you go to Alexandria and you touch the walls of that citadel, you might be touching a stone that once sat 400 feet in the air guiding ships home.
That's a cool thought. And actually, underwater archaeologists have found pieces that weren't reused. There are massive statues and blocks just sitting on the floor of the harbor right now.
So the physical structure is gone, or I guess rearranged. But the memory, we still use the word Pharos in so many languages to mean lighthouse.
Yes, Pharaoh in Spanish, fair in French. Even the study of lighthouses is called pharology. The name of the island became the word for the technology itself. That is a legacy that outlasts stone.
This brings us to the deeper philosophy of the whole thing, because you and I have talked about this off-air. Why do humans build lighthouses?
It's a fascinating question, right? If you think about it, a lighthouse is weirdly altruistic. It's not a shop. It doesn't charge you admission as you sail by.
Right. There's no toll booth on the ocean. You don't swipe a credit card when you see the beam.
It is built for strangers. It represents a kind of sacred compulsion in humanity to leave the lights on.
Leaving lights on for strangers. I love that phrasing.
It's about guiding people you will never meet toward a safety you will never witness. The lighthouse keeper doesn't know who is on those ships. They don't know if they are good people or bad people, merchants or pirates. They just know that someone is out there in the dark and they need help.
It feels like a metaphor for so much of what we do.
It is. Think about a teacher, a writer, a scientist sharing their research. Anyone who creates knowledge or shares wisdom is a lighthouse keeper.
You're putting something out there. A lesson, a book, a fact, hoping that maybe years down the line, someone lost at sea will see it and find their way.
Exactly. You trust that the signal will reach someone who needs it. In a universe that is mostly void and mostly darkness, we are the species that insists on building towers of light. We tend these small flames hoping someone sees them and makes it home.
That is beautiful. It makes me think about this show, honestly. We're just trying to shine a little light on these facts.
And hopefully it helps someone navigate their day.
So to recap fact number 6, we have a skyscraper in the ancient world, taller than anything except the pyramids.
A building that was not a tomb, but a machine.
We have a bronze mirror that acts like a primitive laser, using physics that wouldn't be understood for a millennium.
And we have a symbol of safety that redefined what it meant to travel the seas.
A blend of architecture, optics, and practical seamanship. The Pharos wasn't just a wonder because it was big, it was a wonder because it was useful. It saved lives.
And it proved that even thousands of years ago, we were capable of pushing back the dark in a very, very literal way. It's a reminder that technology, at its best, isn't just about efficiency, it's about care. It's about protecting each other.
I couldn't agree more. What a way to wrap up the bottom half of our list.
It really sets the bar high for the top 5.
Oh, the bar has been raised. We are leaving the waters of Alexandria and heading into territory that is even more mind-bending.
It's gonna get intense.
We are entering the top 5. From here on out, every fact we cover is a complete paradigm shift. Let's look at fact number 5, the discovery that changed how we define life itself. Our path to fact number 1 keeps going forward. Let's dive into fact number 5.
And honestly, this is a heavy hitter. We're going back to around 435 BCE to the sanctuary of Olympia in Greece.
Okay.
We are standing in the shadow of what might just be the single most ambitious piece of art from the ancient world. We're talking about the statue of Zeus.
And before we even get into the mechanics of this thing, which are, they're just mind-blowing,
Oh, absolutely.
I kind of want to frame the mission here.
Yeah.
Because I think we have this tendency, when we talk about ancient wonders, to see them through a very specific, very modern lens.
Right. We think of them as museum pieces.
Exactly.
You picture like white marble, some velvet ropes, quiet rooms, static, safe.
Yeah, oh, look, they carved a nice man in a toga. But looking at the sources you pulled for this, that is completely the wrong way to think about it. This wasn't designed to be looked at. It was designed to do something to you.
Yes.
It was a physical embodiment of divine power meant to make you feel absolutely tiny.
That is the perfect way to frame it. This is the masterwork of Phidias. And Phidias wasn't just a sculptor. He was arguably the greatest artist of antiquity.
Right.
But for this, he was basically an architect of human perception. His goal wasn't just to make a likeness of Zeus. It was to investigate how humanity could give a physical form to the concept of infinity.
Which just sounds impossible. How do you build infinity with hand tools? So, okay, let's get into the specs. Let's look at how he actually tried to do that. We're talking about the 36-foot god.
Approximately 12 meters, yeah. So somewhere between 36 and 40 feet tall.
Okay, let's just unpack that. 40 feet, that's what, like a 4-story building?
Yeah.
But here is the critical detail that just changes everything.
Mm-hmm.
He isn't standing up.
That's the key. He is seated on a throne.
Which implies this terrifying amount of potential energy. If a seated figure is 40 feet tall, the scale is just off. It's wrong for a human brain to process.
It creates a massive disconnect. And this brings us to one of the most famous descriptions of the statue from the geographer Strabo.
What did he say?
He famously remarked that if Zeus were to stand up, he would unroof the temple.
That is such a wild image, just bursting through the architecture like the Hulk or something.
It creates a very, very specific spatial relationship. You have to understand, the Temple of Zeus itself was massive. It was the biggest in the region.
But the statue?
The statue filled nearly the entire interior aisle. It was tight. It was almost claustrophobic.
Okay, and this is where it takes that sharp turn. Because usually, right, if you put a piece of furniture in a room and it's too big, that's just bad design.
It's an IKEA mistake.
It's an IKEA mistake. You didn't measure the door frame, but you're saying this was a deliberate choice.
Absolutely deliberate. It wasn't poor planning. It was a theological statement.
How so?
By making the god too big for the room, Phidias was saying that the divine cannot be contained by human architecture. It created this physical tension, this feeling that the building itself was struggling to hold him in.
I love that. It turns the building into a cage for something that's too big to be caged.
Yeah.
That potential energy again. But I want to walk through the actual experience of seeing it.
Yeah.
Because the source material describes this really cinematic sequence of entering the temple that I think gets lost.
You have to remember the environment. This is Greece. It's Olympia, probably during the games.
Right.
It is bright, blinding Mediterranean sunshine outside.
So it's hot, it's dusty, you've got thousands of people yelling.
Exactly. So you're walking through the sanctuary surrounded by all that noise and heat. And then you step through these great bronze doors of the temple
And into the dark.
into a cool, dim sanctuary. I mean, no electric lights, obviously. Just whatever light filtered in through the doorway, maybe some high vents. Your eyes are struggling to adjust.
You're basically blind for a few seconds.
And as your vision starts to clear, as your pupils dilate, you realize what's in front of you. Because of that tight fit we talked about, you aren't seeing this from a safe distance.
Oh, wow.
It's right there. Impossibly close. Impossibly huge.
The source mentioned you couldn't even see the whole face at once.
No, the perspective just wouldn't allow it. You're standing at the feet. You have to crane your neck back until it physically aches just to see his chest. You see features, a beard, an eye, a finger, but each feature is the size of a human being.
That is terrifying. That's not peaceful contemplation.
That's meant to be terrifying. The source calls it involuntary awe.
Involuntary.
It's a biological response. Your knees buckle. Before your mind can even process, oh, that's a statue, your body is reacting to the sheer scale of the predator or the god in the room with you.
And it wasn't just the size, though. It was what it was made of. Because if this was just a big stone statue, okay,
Yeah.
maybe your brain could handle it. But we have to talk about chryselephantine construction.
A mouthful of a word, but it's absolutely crucial. It's the defining technology of this kind of high-end Greek sculpture.
It sounds like a dinosaur, but it's actually a technique. So break it down for us.
It comes from the Greek chrysos for gold and elephantinos for ivory.
Gold and ivory. So paint the picture. This wasn't stone.
Not at all. And we need to get away from the idea of, yellowed old piano keys. Fresh, polished ivory has a kind of translucency to it. It actually absorbs light a few millimeters below the surface and then scatters it.
That's what human skin does.
Precisely. So the skin of the god, his face, chest, arms, legs, was made of these carved ivory plates. In that dim light, it didn't look like rock. It looked alive.
I bet that's eerie.
It glowed warmly. It was veined with color. It looked soft.
And then the robes,
Hammered gold sheets.
which would just catch any light in there.
Exactly. It would throw the lamplight back at you in waves of radiance. So you have this glowing, warm skin surrounded by blazing, shimmering gold, all sitting on a throne of cedar, ebony, and precious stones.
It's a total sensory overload.
It is. And the smell, don't forget the smell. The temple would have smelled of cedar wood, incense, and the olive oil they used to maintain the ivory. It was a complete immersive environment designed to just short-circuit your logical brain.
I want to go back to the construction for a second because the source uses this analogy that I thought was perfect.
Yeah.
He said building this was like creating a hyper-realistic VR experience, but in physical reality, using only hand tools.
It's a great comparison because the goal was total immersion, but the technical difficulty is, it's hard to overstate. Just think about the ivory.
Right.
You're taking elephant tusks, which are curved, hollow, and relatively small, and you have to turn them into a seamless, massive chest and a face.
How do you even do that? You can't just glue tusks together like a mosaic.
No, it required a technique that was almost lost to history. You have to cut hundreds of individual pieces, and then you have to soak them, probably in vinegar or some kind of boiling solution, to soften the material.
They were bending the ivory.
They were effectively unrolling it,
Hmm.
flattening it, bending it, shaping it to match the anatomical perfection of muscle and bone curves.
And then fitting them together so you don't see the lines.
Exactly. The joinery had to be invisible. If you saw a seam running down Zeus's cheek, the whole illusion of a living god just breaks.
Wow.
Phidias was basically creating the world's first photorealistic sculpture at a scale that nobody would even attempt again for 2,000 years.
And underneath all of that priceless gold and ivory,
A wooden skeleton.
that's the part that stresses me out.
It should. There was a massive wooden armature inside holding everything up. It had to support tons and tons of material. If there was one miscalculation in the wood or one crack in a critical ivory piece,
A face of God collapses.
the entire illusion just crumbles into a pile. It was an engineering high-wire act. You're building a skyscraper out of organic materials inside a building with no climate control.
So what does this all mean then? We've had this huge, glowing, unbelievably expensive engineering marvel. But it wasn't just decoration, it was saying something specific.
It was what you could call visual theology. Just look at what he was holding. In his right hand, a statue of Nike, the goddess of victory.
The statue in the hand of a statue.
And it was basically a life-size statue held like a toy. And in his left hand, a scepter topped with an eagle. These weren't just props.
No.
They were symbols of supreme authority. It was telling you, I control victory. I control the natural world. I am the order of the cosmos.
It's setting a hierarchy. There's God, then there's everything else, and way down at the bottom there's you.
Exactly. It makes you feel small because in that worldview, you are small.
It's interesting you mentioned order, because maintaining this thing sounds like a chaotic nightmare. You said Olympia is near a river, right?
It's the swampy river valley. It's damp. And ivory is, well, it's a temperamental material.
It's a diva.
A total diva. It hates humidity, it can warp and rot, but it also hates dryness, it cracks.
So the priests had a job on their hands.
They had to constantly treat the statue with oil to preserve the surface and stop it from splitting. But here is where Phidias turned a maintenance problem into a special effect.
The pool.
The pool.
Yeah.
They built a shallow basin of black limestone right in front of the statue and kept it filled with olive oil.
Functionally, that oil was there to regulate the humidity, like a giant ancient humidifier.
Functionally, yes, but visually, imagine a perfectly still black pool of oil in a dark room. It acts as a perfect mirror.
So light comes in from the high windows.
It hits the pool of oil and reflects upward. It illuminated the face of the god from below.
It is such a cool detail. The practical maintenance solution becomes part of the lighting design.
It gave him this unearthly underlighting. It made him look like he was glowing from within. Everything, even the cleaning routine, served the illusion.
But as we know, nothing lasts forever.
Mm.
Especially not wood and ivory in a swamp.
Sadly, no. The end of the wonder is a bit ambiguous, as these things often are. It stood for roughly 800 years, which is incredible.
8 centuries of people being terrified by this thing.
A very long run, but it was always threatened by earthquakes, fires, and just slow decay.
So what happened?
There are 2 main theories. Some say it was destroyed in a fire at the temple itself in 425 CE. Others suggest it was dismantled and carefully moved to Constantinople to the Palace of Lausus.
Which was basically a collection of the greatest hits of ancient art.
It was. And if it did go there, it was probably destroyed in a massive fire that swept through that city later on.
So either way, fire got it in the end. It's gone.
Completely. Not a scrap of the gold or ivory remains. We only know what it looked like from descriptions and some images on coins.
But it left a mark. I mean, it was
Yeah.
one of the 7 wonders for a reason.
It was a wonder because it transformed raw materials into a living presence. It proved that you could take wood and bone and metal and make something that felt like it had a soul.
And that brings us to the why. Why do we do this? Why do humans feel the need to build something so big that it makes us feel small? This wasn't cheap. This was a massive resource sink.
That's the big philosophical question, isn't it? The statue wasn't built to comfort people. It wasn't a warm hug. It was built to dominate, to humble you.
It's like standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon.
Exactly that. Or looking up at the night sky. There is a deep human need for awe. We have this desire to stand before something so big that our personal concerns, our bills, our arguments, our little stresses, they just shrink to nothing.
It's perspective. It forces you out of your own head.
It is. When you stood before Zeus, you weren't thinking about what you were going to have for dinner. You were thinking about your place in the universe. You were feeling the sublime.
The source material had this really provocative thought that I can't stop thinking about. It suggests that Zeus didn't even need to be real for the religious experience to work.
Go on.
The idea that the statue was the real divinity. because it was proof that human beings could pour that much genius, that much resource, that much engineering into an abstract idea.
That's a beautiful thought. We don't worship gods. We worship what we're capable of imagining.
Yeah.
The statue was a mirror in a way. It showed us the scale of our own capacity to create meaning.
It's just amazing to think that Phidias, in a workshop with hand tools, was trying to hack the human brain. He knew exactly what buttons to push to generate that feeling of the divine.
He was an engineer of human emotion as much as he was a sculptor.
So we've gone from the physical construction, the Crace-Philippantine technique, the hidden wood, the bending of ivory, all the way to the psychological impact of this 36-foot god. It's a journey from the material to the metaphysical.
And that's what makes it a wonder. It's not just a big pile of gold. It's a bridge between the human and the infinite. It showed that we can build things that are bigger than ourselves.
The evidence for what we just discussed is undeniable, but it leads us to an even bigger question. Fact number 4 isn't just a theory. It's a visible, tangible miracle of the natural world.
This is fact 4. More than halfway already. Let's keep moving forward. Let's dive into fact number 4.
We are, yeah. We're really moving through the list. We've covered, endurance, mysterious construction, the sheer scale of ancient ambition.
We really have. We've seen humanity pushing the absolute boundaries of what's possible.
Exactly. Pyramids built in 20 years, statues that practically touch the sky.
But here is where things take a sharp turn.
A very sharp and, frankly, a much darker turn.
Yeah, because up until now, this whole deep dive has been about the miracle of creation.
Yeah.
Building the impossible. But fact number 4, it's not about building. It's about how fragile those things actually are. I was looking at the source stack you sent, Pliny the Elder, modern psychology journals, everything, and we're heading to the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus.
Ah, yes, Ephesus, modern-day Turkey. This is a story that it actually hurts a little bit to tell. If you love history or art, it's basically the story of a masterpiece colliding with a massive ego.
It really is. The sources all describe this place as one of the most magnificent sanctuaries in the entire Mediterranean. But the hook here, the thing that lands it on our list, isn't how beautiful it was.
No.
It's that its most famous moment isn't its construction, it's its destruction. And not by an army, not by an earthquake, by one single guy with a terrifyingly simple motive.
And that's the tragedy of it. The asymmetry. It takes thousands of people decades to build, and one person one night to end it all.
So before we get to the arsonist, let's just try to understand what was lost. I think when people hear Greek temple, they picture the Parthenon.
Right. The Parthenon in Athens, rectangular, white columns, sits up on a hill.
Is that what we're talking about?
No, and you really have to purge that image from your mind to get this. The Parthenon is beautiful, don't get me wrong, but it's compact.
Yeah.
The Temple of Artemis, the Artemision, was, in terms of sheer scale, it was maybe 3 to 4 times the size of the Parthenon.
3 or 4 times. So we're not talking about a church, we're talking about a stadium.
Think about it like this. The base was about the size of an American football field. But it wasn't just the footprint, it was the height. It had 127 columns, each one standing about 60 feet high.
60 feet? That's a 6-story building, and there are over 100 of them.
127. And they weren't plain like the Parthenon's columns. These were ionic, slender, fluted, incredibly ornate. Some of them even had sculptures carved right into the base. The sources call it a forest of marble.
A forest of marble?
Yeah. You were just walking into a building. You were walking into a man-made landscape. It was designed to feel overwhelming. Like the forests Artemis was the goddess of.
I found this one detail in the research just fascinating. Pliny the Elder mentions where they built it. It wasn't on a hill, right?
No, and that was a stroke of genius by the architects.
Yeah.
They built it on marshy ground near the river.
Which sounds like a terrible idea. Swamps and heavy marble.
It's counterintuitive, but it was the safest place. They knew the region had earthquakes, so they figured the soft, marshy soil would act as a kind of dampener.
A shock absorber.
Exactly, a shock absorber. To stop it from sinking, they laid down these thick layers of charcoal and trampled sheepskins under the foundation, a sort of floating buffer.
That's incredible. So they engineered it to survive the earth itself moving.
They planned for nature. They didn't plan for human nature.
Right, and inside.
It was a treasury. Gold, cedar, artworks from all over the known world. It was sort of like the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the Vatican rolled into one, a monument to generations of devotion.
Okay, so we have this masterpiece, and now we have to pinpoint the date. And this is one of those coincidences that just feels scripted.
It is a strange alignment. The date is July 21st, 356 BCE.
356 BCE. And why does that date ring a bell?
Because it is, by pure coincidence, the exact same night that Alexander the Great was born.
One empire rises as one wonder falls. There's a famous quick about that, isn't there?
There is, yeah. The historian Plutarch later wrote that the goddess Artemis was too busy delivering Alexander in Macedonia to save her own temple in Ephesus. A little bit of dark ancient humor.
Okay, so Artemis is out of the office. I want to try something here. To really get the gravity of this, we need to be there. I want to do a visualization.
Let's do it.
Okay, I want you, our listener, to just imagine you are there. It's 356 BCE. It's late. The Mediterranean heat of the day is gone. You're standing inside the Temple of Artemis.
And just imagine the scale. The ceiling is lost in shadow, 60 feet up, those massive cedar beams holding everything up.
Right. You're a priest, maybe a guard on your evening rounds. It's totally quiet. The only sound is your sandals on the polished marble. You're walking through that forest of columns. It feels permanent, eternal.
And then the shift.
You smell it first. It's not incense. It's sharp, acrid. It's the smell of smoke where there should be no smoke.
Yeah.
You look up, craning your neck toward those massive cedar beams.
And cedar's key here. It burns incredibly hot. It's full of oil and resin.
And you see it, an orange light, flickering high up in the darkness. It's catching, it's spreading. And suddenly, the silence is just gone. The fire starts roaring. The source text describes the sound as, like, the world breaking.
That's a chilling description. And we have to correct the misconception here. We think stone buildings are fireproof. You know, it's marble, it won't burn.
Exactly. I mean, you can't set a rock on fire, so how does a marble temple burn down?
It's chemistry. Marble is calcium carbonate. When you get it hot enough, and a cedar-fueled fire gets incredibly hot, the stone doesn't just get sooty, it undergoes a chemical reaction. It's called calcination.
Calcination.
Yeah, the marble basically turns into quicklime. It loses all structural integrity and just crumbles into powder. So the columns aren't just getting dirty, they're chemically disintegrating. Some of them probably exploded from the inside out.
That is terrifying. So you're watching tapestries burst into ash in seconds. You see gold fixtures melting, running down the columns like water. And the great statue of Artemis, wood and ivory and gold, it just starts to blacken, to split in the heat.
It's the death of a culture, happening in real time.
By dawn, the sun comes up, and that forest of marble, it's gone. A smoking ruin. Centuries of art, just charred stumps and piles of lime dust.
A devastating image. And when the sun rose, the shock must have been absolute, because there was no army at the gates.
No, they found the culprit pretty quickly. Or maybe he made sure he was found.
This is where we meet the villain of the story, a man named Herostratus.
Herostratus. Now, usually when someone burns down a major religious site, there's a reason. Was he a revolutionary? A religious fanatic?
That's exactly what the Ephesians wanted to know. They captured him, they interrogated him, probably tortured him, and they demanded to know who sent him. Was it the Persians? Was it a rival city?
And the answer was so much more disturbing than a political plot.
He confessed that his motive was neither political nor religious. He said, "Nobody sent me." His sole goal, his only obsession, was to secure everlasting fame.
Fame, that's it. He burned down a wonder of the world for clout.
That's it. He looked at his own life and realized he was a nobody. He wanted his name to be remembered forever. He calculated, very coldly, that he couldn't create anything beautiful enough to be remembered for. But he could destroy something so beautiful that the destruction could never be forgotten.
That is terrifyingly modern.
It's the birth of a very specific type of psychology, what we now call herostratic fame.
Let's unpack that. Herostratic fame. It feels like its own category of evil.
It is. It's the belief that any attention, even negative, is better than being ignored. That being a villain in history is better than not being in history at all. It is narcissism weaponized against civilization itself. He basically said, "You will remember me, even if you hate me for it."
And the people of Ephesus, they got it. They understood exactly what he was doing, didn't
Yeah, they did. And their reaction was fascinating. They didn't just execute him. I mean, they did that, obviously. But they knew killing him wasn't enough, because death doesn't stop fame.
So they tried to kill his ghost.
They passed a decree, a legal decree of damnatio memoria,
Which means
condemnation of memory. It became forbidden, under penalty of death, for anyone to even mention his name. They wanted to make sure his quest for fame failed utterly. They wanted him to be just the arsonist, never Herostratus, to erase him from the human record.
And here's the irony that just makes this story so... We're sitting here right now on a deep dive about the Extraordinary 10. And what is the name we keep saying?
Herostratus.
We know his name better than the name of the architect. You mentioned him, Teucriphon, but I'd never heard of him before this.
And that's the tragedy, the failure of the punishment. And we only know his name because of a kind of a leak. A historian named Theopompus wrote about it later, and he recorded the name specifically to condemn the act.
Oh, wow.
He wrote it down to say, look at this monster. But in writing it down to warn people, he preserved it forever.
It's like the Streisand effect of the ancient world. Trying to suppress it is what made sure it survived.
Exactly. The attempt to erase him is what guaranteed his survival. He became a symbol. He won. In a twisted, dark way, he got exactly what he wanted.
Yeah. I want to analyze this a bit deeper because the sources bring up this powerful analogy. Terrorism as performance art.
It helps to put it in context for a modern listener.
Right. So imagine someone today walking into, say, the Sistine Chapel or Notre Dame Cathedral. We all saw the grief from that fire. Now imagine it wasn't an accident. Imagine it was one person with a gas can doing it just so they'd be famous.
It's the idea of, if I can't paint the Sistine Chapel, I'll burn it down so my name is linked to Michelangelo's forever.
It's parasitic. It attaches a small, pathetic ego to a huge collective achievement. The builder disappears into the work. The destroyer stands on the ruins, shouting his own name.
And it exposes how fragile it all is. Civilization basically relies on a group agreement not to burn everything down. It only takes one person to break that deal.
But, and this is the pivot, the story doesn't end with the fire.
No, it doesn't. And this is the inspiring part of the story, the part that often gets left out.
The Ephesians woke up, saw the ruin, executed the man responsible. But then what? Did they give up?
They absolutely refused to surrender. That's the counter impulse. Resilience. They cleared the rubble and almost immediately began planning a new temple. And not just a replica, a bigger one, more elaborate, more magnificent.
So you burn our temple, we'll build a bigger one.
Exactly. And there's a great story here with Alexander the Great again.
Oh, he comes back into it.
He does. Decades later, Alexander is marching through Asia Minor. He gets to Ephesus, sees the new temple under construction, this massive project, and he offers to fund the entire thing.
Writes him a blank check.
A blank check.
Right.
But with one condition. He wanted his name inscribed on the front as the dedicator.
A branding deal. The Temple of Artemis, brought to you by Alexander.
Right. And the Ephesians? They refused.
They turned down Alexander the Great.
They did. They needed the money, but they had too much pride to let their goddess's home become a monument to a king's ego. But you can't just say no to Alexander.
So how did they manage it?
They used a brilliant line of slattery. They told him, it is not fitting for one god to build a temple for another.
Wow. That is smooth.
It worked. Alexander respected it. So the Ephesians finished it themselves. Women sold their jewelry. People donated their wages. It was a collective act of defiance.
I love that. By 323 BCE, the rebuilt temple rose on the same site. And it was the second one that reclaimed its status as a wonder of the ancient world, even more impressive than the first.
It brings up this really beautiful philosophical point. The tension between creation and destruction. It is always, always easier to destroy than to create. Any fool can strike a match. It takes a master to carve a column.
Right. Gravity works for the destroyer. Entropy is on their side.
For sure. But for every Herostratus, there were hundreds of unnamed craftsmen who carved those columns. Thousands of citizens who donated to rebuild.
The builders don't get the fame.
No, we don't know their names. But they're the real heroes. They're the ones who refused to let darkness have the final word. The story isn't just about the fire. It's about refusing to let the fire be the end.
Which leads us to the modern dilemma. This is where we connect it back to you, the listener.
We live in an age Herostratus would have loved.
Oh, absolutely. He would have thrived on social media. The algorithm is basically a Herostratus engine. It rewards outrage.
The most extreme voices get the most engagement.
We share the names of the vandals, the shooters, we doom scroll the destruction.
But in doing that, we're giving the modern Herostratus exactly what he wants. We're etching his name into the digital record.
So the question we have to ask is, in our age of viral infamy, how do we deny attention to those who crave it through harm?
It's a tough question, because our instinct is to look at the fire. But maybe the answer isn't in how we remember the destroyers, but in how we honor the builders. We face the same dilemma as Ephesus. If we spend all our time analyzing the arsonist, we ignore the architects.
We have to amplify the creation.
Shift our focus. It's about protecting the treasures we have, whether they're buildings or institutions or even just the truth. We have a responsibility to be the builders, the ones who reconstruct.
That's a powerful thought. It's an active choice. You choose whether you're feeding the fire or laying a stone for the foundation.
And realizing that while the fire is spectacular, the stone lasts longer. The Second Temple stood for another 600 years. It outlasted the memory of the fire.
It's a reflection on the fragility of everything we value. It makes you want to go out and protect something beautiful.
Or build something beautiful, even if no one remembers your name for it.
That is the spirit of this deep dive. We look at the past not just to say, wow, but to ask, what now? Fact number 4 is a warning, but it's also, I think, a rallying cry.
For the builders.
Exactly. Before we wrap, one final thought. Herostratus wanted his name to be immortal, and, well, he succeeded. We're saying it now, but think about how we say it.
We say it with disgust,
Yeah.
with pity. It's a synonym for a pathetic kind of villainy.
Right. He got fame, but he didn't get glory, and there was a huge difference. The builders, they got glory, even without their names. I'd rather be the unnamed builder than the named arsonist any day.
A distinction worth making.
All right, that closes the book on the Temple of Artemis. We have 3 facts left, the top 3. And if you think you've heard it all, burning temples, space daggers, 20-year pyramids, you are mistaken.
We're entering some really strange territory now.
We really are. I almost didn't believe this next one when I first read it. It sounds like science fiction, but as you're about to hear in fact number 3, the reality is even more extraordinary than the fiction.
Stay with us. We are moving deeper into our countdown. Let's dive into fact number 3.
We're getting into the really heavy hitters now. This is where the list really starts to change how we see the past.
It really is. And for this one, I want to pivot away from the usual suspects. Forget Rome, forget Athens for just a second.
Okay.
I want to take a trip somewhere that feels a little more modern, but is completely unexpected. We are going to modern-day Germany.
Right. We are heading to the city of Cologne.
Exactly. Cologne. When you think of Cologne today, you think, what, Gothic cathedrals, the Rhine River?
A big industrial hub.
Right. But beneath all that, beneath the pavement, there's this whole other world. It used to be a Roman settlement called Colonia Claudia Era Agrippinensium.
That's a mouthful.
It is. And a while back, archaeologists were digging beneath a Protestant church right in the city center.
Which is usually how these stories start. You dig under a church in Europe, you're bound to hit something.
But in this case, what they hit was just confusing.
Very confused.
They found these massive ancient walls. But the weird thing wasn't the walls themselves, it was what was in them. The walls had these mysterious niches hollowed out.
Just rows and rows of them.
Yeah, just recesses. It was a massive puzzle. I mean, picture finding a basement wall that just has a bunch of holes in it.
So what did they think it was at first?
Well, the team thought, okay, are these cupboards? Maybe for storing wine, statues. But they were all empty. It looked like storage, but for what?
And this is where the context of the city becomes so important. We have to remember what Cologne was back then. It wasn't some sleepy village.
No, it was the capital of the Lower Germanic province. It was the frontier.
It was the Wild West, but it was also a center of high culture. You had thousands of soldiers, sure, but also governors, judges, engineers. And that population creates a need.
A need for information.
Exactly. And to solve the mystery of these cupboards, the researchers had to look hundreds of miles away.
To Turkey, right.
Right. To the famous library of Celsus in Ephesus. When they compared the architecture of the walls in Cologne to the library in Ephesus, everything clicked.
Wow. So these weren't pantries.
No, they were storage systems for knowledge.
Okay, let's unpack this because this blows my mind. We are talking about a massive Roman library from the 2nd century CE in Germany.
On the edge of the map.
On the edge of the map where they're constantly fighting off Germanic tribes. Why? Why build a center of high learning there?
Well, that's the brilliance of it. The Romans understood that you don't conquer the world just with swords.
You conquer it with culture, with law.
Exactly. This library wasn't just a university. It was a symbol. It was a power move. It said, we are here, and we bring order, we bring civilization.
Look at our books.
Precisely. And the engineering backs that up. You mentioned the niches, but there's a detail in the report that is just wild.
You're talking about the double walls.
I am. When they analyzed the structure, they realized there wasn't just one wall, there was a gap, an air gap between the outer stone wall and the inner shell where the scrolls lived.
So like insulation.
Kind of, but for humidity control. Think about where we are, the Rhineland. It is damp. It is cold.
Right.
If you put papyrus directly against a cold, damp stone wall in Germany, what happens?
It gets moldy. It rots.
It decomposes, and fast.
Huh.
The Romans engineered a specific air gap system to circulate air and keep the data dry.
That's incredible. They were climate controlling the server room.
That's a perfect way to put it. It shows how valuable these texts were. You don't build that for, tax receipt.
You do it for literature, philosophy, imperial law.
The important stuff.
Now, speaking of the text, the title of this fact in our countdown is the 1,000 Scroll Library. But looking at the source material, I feel like we need to address the numbers here.
Yeah, that number is a bit conservative.
1,000 scrolls sounds manageable, but based on the size of this place.
The experts estimate this building could have held up to 20,000 scrolls.
20,000. Okay, I have to push back on that. That sounds huge. How do we get from a few holes in the wall to 20,000 works?
It sounds high, I know, but it's the storage method. We're not talking about books on a shelf with spines out.
We're talking about scrolls.
Scrolls stacked in a honeycomb pattern. Some of these niches were deep. You could stack multiple scrolls in each cubbyhole. It's very dense storage.
Okay, so if you calculate the square footage of the shelving,
20,000 is a reasonable upper limit, and that puts it in the league of the great libraries of the ancient world.
maybe not Alexandria, but still.
It makes it a provincial supercomputer, essentially.
Imagine managing that, though. 20,000 manuscripts without a computer. I can't even find a file on my desktop sometimes. How did that actually work?
Well, let's talk about the user experience of a Roman library.
Yeah, walk me through it. I'm a Roman official in 150 CE. I need a precedent on tax law. I walk in. What do I see? There's no search bar.
No, the UX was tactile and human. First, you walk in. The space is massive, 2 stories high, probably with galleries. Light is streaming in from high windows.
Which also keeps the dampness out.
Exactly, and the smell. The research on the smell is fascinating. It's not just old book smell.
What is it then?
It's a mix. Papyrus has this very grassy, organic scent. Then you have leather from the scroll cases. But the dominant smell would likely be cedar oil.
Cedar oil? Why?
They used it as a preservative. To keep moths and bookworms away from the scrolls, would have smelled like a forest mixed with, I don't know, a chemical lab.
Okay, so I'm breathing in the cedar. I see walls covered in these honeycomb niches. How do I find the tax law?
You'd look for the tags. This is the wine rack analogy. The scrolls were stacked horizontally. Dangling from the end of each was a little tag called a silly boy.
What now?
A silly boy. It's a strip of parchment that listed the title and author, so you'd scan the tags.
But with 20,000 of them.
Realistically, you wouldn't do it alone. You'd ask the search engine?
The search engine being a person.
Exactly. The librarian. Likely a highly educated slave or freedman whose entire job was to map this collection in their head. You tell them river tax law, reign of Vespasian, and they go right to it.
It's incredible. We think of the cloud as this modern invention. But in a way, this was the ancient cloud.
That's a fascinating way to put it. The ancient internet.
Think about it. It was humanity's attempt to centralize all knowledge in one physical space. You didn't Google it. You went to the stone building near the bathhouse. It was a public server.
Citizens, officials, scholars, they all access the same hard drive. A data center built of stone and mortar.
But here is where things take a sharp turn.
This is the tragic part of the story, the reality of the discovery.
Right, we have this vivid image. We have the walls, the climate control, the 20,000 scrolls. But if I went to that church basement today,
You would find the niches, you would find the stone, but you would not find a single scroll.
nothing, not even a fragment, a clasp. How did 20,000 scrolls just vanish without a trace?
Chemical decay is absolute. Papyrus and parchment are organic materials. They're just grass and skin.
So over 2,000 years of dampness, wars, rebuilding.
The organic material didn't just break, it chemically reverted to dust.
So the stone survived. The hardware survived.
What the software is gone. We have the architectural skeleton. We can measure the space where knowledge lived. But the information itself, total erasure.
It's haunting. It's like finding a ghost ship.
It really is a ghost of knowledge. We're standing in a room designed to hold the collective wisdom of an empire, and it is completely silent.
That silence is loud, though. It makes you realize what we missed. Imagine what was in there.
Lost plays. Histories of people we've never heard of. It's almost certain there were unique texts, especially about the Germanic wars or local history. When that papyrus turned to dust, those voices were extinguished forever.
It brings up this really powerful analogy that the source material touches on. And this is where it gets really scary for us, sitting here in the 21st century.
The future server farm analogy.
Yeah. Walk us through this, because this gave me chills.
So imagine an archaeologist in the year, say, 4000 AD. Our civilization has changed beyond recognition, and they start digging.
And they're digging up what? Northern Virginia.
Yeah.
The data center capital of the world.
Right. They dig through the layers and they find a massive building, they find the racks, they find the cooling pipes, our version of the double walls.
They find the hardware?
The hardware, the infrastructure. But the power has been off for 2,000 years. The magnetic drives have degraded. The solid-state drives have lost their charge.
Every single hard drive is blank.
Blank. They know terabytes of data were there. They know this was a repository of our entire civilization.
Our love letters, our scientific breakthroughs,
Our court cases, our memes,
our podcasts.
even our podcasts, everything that makes us human, but they can't read a single word. It is all just plastic and metal silence.
And that is exactly what the Cologne Library is. It's a data center of papyrus where the hardware is left, but the software has been erased.
It forces us to confront the difference between the container and the content. We think if the building survives, the history survives. Cologne proves that's just not true.
It really makes you think about stone versus silicon.
That's the philosophical pivot here, isn't it? We tend to think we're superior because we can store so much more information. We have the cloud, we have backups.
But are we actually any safer? Really?
That is the question. The source mentions the concept of bit rot.
Bit rot. It sounds like a disease.
In a way it is. It's the decay of digital information. And not just a hard drive failing, I mean format rot.
Explain that.
Okay, think about a clay tablet from ancient Sumeria. It's 5,000 years old. If you know the language, you can look at it with your naked eye and read it.
Right. It requires no technology.
Now think about a WordPerfect document from 1995. To read that, you don't just need the file. You need the software to open it, the operating system to run the software, and the hardware to run the operating system.
It's a whole chain of dependency.
And if one link in that chain breaks, if the company goes bust, if the format becomes obsolete, the information is locked away. It's encrypted by time.
I see what you mean. We're creating these incredibly complex locks for our own knowledge, and we just assume the keys will always be there.
We assume the cloud is eternal, but the cloud is just someone else's computer in a big building.
And if the power goes out, or the server farm is abandoned,
Then we're just left with the empty niches again.
rows of empty racks.
Exactly. The Cologne Library is a warning. It suggests that 2,000 years from now, the future might look at our data centers the exact same way we look at those empty walls. Evidence that we knew things, but no clue what we knew.
Just evidence of potential. It implies the only difference between stone and silicon is how long it takes to crumble.
Or that silicon might be even more fragile. At least stone gives you a skeleton. Digital data just evaporates.
That is a terrifying thought. The most documented generation in history might be leaving behind less physical evidence than the Romans.
It's the paradox of our age. We're writing in disappearing ink.
So what's the takeaway for the listener? Why should they care about a hole in the ground in Germany?
I think it's a call to understand the difference between saving and preserving. We hit save on a document and we think we've preserved it, but we haven't.
We've just stored it in a temporary state.
Right. Real preservation requires maintenance. It requires migration to new formats. It requires care.
The Romans tried. Cedar oil and double walls. They did the best they could with their technology.
And they still lost it all. It's not enough to just save something. You have to actively keep it alive.
It also adds so much mystery. When you look at those empty niches, you have to wonder, what's the missing piece?
What was on that scroll that might have changed how we understand everything? It's all there in that negative space. The library is defined by what's missing.
You know, it reminds me of that feeling when you walk into a really old bookstore and you feel the weight of all the thoughts around you.
But here, you feel the weight of the silence.
And that silence is the lesson about the fragility of human thought.
It's humbling.
Truly, it makes you want to go home and print out your photos or write a letter on actual paper.
Maybe carve it into a slab of granite just to be safe.
Exactly. Go back to basics. If you really want something to last, don't put it on a flash drive.
But think about the people who walked those floors. They felt that knowledge was permanent. They felt the solidity of the stone and thought, this will last forever.
And they were half right. The stone lasted.
But the soul of the place, the words, They vanished.
It is a powerful reminder not to take our own access to knowledge for granted. We have the world at our fingertips, but we have to remember the off switch exists.
And that's why archaeology matters. It retrieves these ghosts. It lets us stand in that basement in Cologne and listen to the echo of those scrolls, even if we can't read them.
A victory against oblivion. I like that. We're reclaiming the memory of the library, even if we can't reclaim the books.
Exactly.
This has been heavy, but in a good way. It's amazing how a few empty shelves can tell such a massive story.
Sometimes the empty spaces speak the loudest.
Well, speaking of loud stories, we are nearing the end of our list.
We are. The air is getting thin up here.
We are down to the final two. The tension is building because fact number 2 sets the stage for the absolute pinnacle of our countdown. This is the logic that holds the entire system together.
Last fact before the big finale. We are moving deeper into our countdown. Let's dive into fact number 2.
This is it. I mean, we are getting perilously close to the top of the mountain, or in this case, the very heart of the pyramid.
You know, it really feels like we've been circling the beast for a while now. We've looked at the logistics, the massive quarries, the workforce, and usually when you talk about the Great Pyramid, the conversation, it just automatically goes macro.
Oh, macro is the default setting. It has to be. You talk about the skyline, the millions of tons of stone, the sheer height of it, the fact that it was the tallest thing on Earth for almost 4,000 years. It's always a conversation about bigness.
Exactly. Bigness is easy. Bigness is obvious. You can see the bigness from a satellite. But for this deep dive, for fact number 2, we are doing the complete opposite.
Precisely. Today, we are zooming in, way in, past the shape, past the skyline, right down to, well, a microscopic level. Because the source material is adamant. The most astonishing feature of the pyramid isn't actually its size.
Which just sounds so counterintuitive.
It does, but the real magic is, it's the invisible precision. We're talking about the seams, the joins between the stones.
Okay, let's unpack that. Because I'll be honest, when I picture the pyramids, and I think most people listening are in the same boat, I see this big, jagged, step-like thing.
Sure.
It looks like a pile of rough rocks. Rugged, weathered, a bit crumbly. It doesn't exactly scream precision engineering.
And that's a completely fair way to see it, but that's because you're looking at the skeleton. You're seeing the core blocks that have been exposed to the elements for centuries. But if you look at the few surviving casing stones,
The ones that made the smooth outer shell.
the smooth white shell, exactly, or you look at the granite stones inside the king's chamber, the whole story changes. The fit is, well, it's frankly disturbing.
Disturbing is a strong word for architecture. How so?
Disturbing in that it just challenges what we think is possible with the tools they had. The sources all highlight that these stones are fitted so tightly together that you cannot slip a razor blade between them.
A razor blade. So we're talking, what, less than a millimeter?
Oh, much less. In some places, the gap is barely even visible to the naked eye. It's like a hairline fracture, but it's a joint between two completely separate objects.
And you have to remember, we aren't talking about 2 bathroom tiles here.
No, we're talking about limestone and granite blocks that weigh as much as a minivan, like a small elephant. Imagine trying to park 2 SUVs next to each other so closely that you can't slide a piece of paper between their bumpers.
And the bumpers are made of rough stone.
Exactly. And then you have to do that 2 million more times.
And you don't have backup cameras. Or parking sensors.
Or hydraulics, right? These aren't cast concrete. That's the modern myth, that you just pour liquid into a mold and it fits perfectly.
Yeah.
No, these are quarried stones. They had to be cut, dragged, lifted, and then fitted with a margin for error of basically 0.
That is it's mind-bending stuff. It's one thing to be big, it's another thing to be perfect, and I think to really get this, we need to get out of the abstract. I want to try something.
Let's do it.
I want to take you, our listener, out of your car or your gym or wherever you are and just drop you right onto the Giza Plateau 4,500 years ago. Let's really simulate this.
Okay, set the scene for us.
All right, close your eyes for a second if you can. It's hot. And I don't just mean summer afternoon hot. I mean Egyptian desert noon hot. The sun is a physical weight. The air is thick with limestone dust that coats your throat. You're a master stone cutter, not a slave. You're a highly valued craftsman. And you are working on block number 847,563.
And you've been at this for years. So your hands are leather, basically. They're calloused. But your fingertips, they're hypersensitive They're more accurate than a modern ruler.
Yeah.
You can feel variations in the stone your eyes can't even see.
You're standing over this massive 2.5-ton block, and your job is to make one specific side of it match the block next to it.
Yeah.
Not kind of, exactly.
Perfect.
Perfect. Because there is no close enough here. You leave a gap, the whole structure weakens. You leave a bump, the next layer won't sit flat. It's a completely unforgiving standard.
Right.
So you take your tool, and this is the part that gets me. You're holding a copper chisel. Copper. It's so soft. You might as well be using a butter knife against rock.
It's soft, but you're using it with a very specific technique. You just tap. You're not hacking away chunks. You are removing material grain by grain.
The patience that takes, grain by grain. You're checking the surface with a straight edge, probably a wooden rod that you've coated in red ochre paint. You press it against the stone, and wherever the red paint sticks, that's a high spot.
So you grind that little red spot down, maybe with a dolerite stone, maybe with some abrasive sand, wipe it clean, paint the rod, check again, grind again. It's this endless loop of verify, correct, verify, correct. It's not construction, it's more like sculpture.
And then comes the moment of truth, the slide.
This is my favorite detail from all the research. When they finally move that massive block into position against its neighbor, it doesn't crash, it doesn't grind.
The source describes it as a whisper.
A whisper. Stone breathing against stone.
That's the sound of air being forced out of the joint. It's literally a vacuum seal being created by solid rock. Two things becoming one continuous surface.
You can't fit papyrus between them. You can't fit a beam of light between them. It effectively becomes a single geological unit.
And you just did that for one side of one stone. Now do it again, again, for the next 20 years.
It just completely changes how you see the people who built this. We think of ancient construction as just brute force.
Right, just throw enough bodies at it.
Exactly. But this wasn't brute force. It was delicate. It was surgery on a geological scale.
Okay, here is where things take a really sharp turn. Because I thought the last fact about logistics was wild, but this next detail, it changed my entire perspective on human capability.
Uh-oh. Here comes the reality check.
Well, whenever we talk about this kind of precision razor blade joints, vacuum seals the modern mind, it just jumps to one conclusion.
Lost technology.
Lost technology. Right. Or aliens with lasers.
Of course. Because how else do you get watchmaker precision on a boulder? It feels like there has to be a trick. We look at our own construction sites with all the power tools and cranes, and we still have gaps in our drywall. So it's comforting to think they had some kind of magic wand.
Right. But the trick is actually more impressive than any laser. The trick is that there was no trick. We know what tools they used. We've found them.
Okay, so dispel the myth. What was actually in the toolbox?
Copper chisels, which we mentioned. Dolerite pounding stones, which are basically just really hard. Round rocks you use to bash other rocks. Wooden mallets. And lots of sand. Abrasive sand, quartz sand, that was their sandpaper. You put sand between a copper saw, which is just a flat blade, and the stone, and you just drag it back and forth. The copper doesn't actually cut the stone. The copper pushes the sand, and the sand cuts the stone.
So it's all just friction.
Pure friction. It is unbelievably labor-intensive. It's slow, it's grueling, but it gives you incredible control.
So no diamond-tipped saws.
Yeah.
No laser levels.
No lasers, no steel, no computers, no electricity. They had sighting rods, literally sticks and plumb bobs, which are just weights on strings, to figure out what was vertical.
That is humbling. Honestly, it's almost embarrassing for us.
It really is. The fit of these stones is tighter than in most modern skyscrapers. The source material draws a direct comparison here. If you look at a modern building, even a high-end one, there are tolerances. There are gaps you fill with silicone or mortar because we assume materials will vary. We accept a certain amount of sloppiness.
We call it tolerance. They would have called it failure.
Exactly. The source makes this incredible point. It says the precision is comparable to machined metal parts, you know, like the pistons in your car's engine. But they applied that standard to rocks the size of SUVs.
I love the skyscraper analogy the source uses. Let's just paint that picture because it really puts the absurdity of this into perspective.
Yeah.
Imagine you're building, say, the Burj Khalifa.
Okay, got it.
But imagine that every single one of the thousands of window panes has to fit its steel frame perfectly. No rubber gaskets to hide the gaps.
Yeah.
No caulk to seal any leaks. Just glass touching steel perfectly everywhere.
And you have to install all of them using only rope and copper tools.
Right. And if you break one, or if one doesn't fit, you can't just order another one from a factory. You have to go quarry a new one and drag it 500 miles.
That is the scale of what they did. It's geometric perfection achieved through just pure human will. It doesn't defy the tools at the time because the tools were magic, but because the hands holding them were disciplined in a way that we can barely comprehend.
So this brings up the big question, right?
Yeah.
The why. Why go to all this trouble?
Yeah, because you could build a pretty impressive pyramid with just okay joints. It would still be big. It would still be a triangle. Why the obsession with the razor blade fit? Why spend 10 extra hours on a stone that's going to be buried in the dark forever?
Was it just showing off? Was the pharaoh just a micromanager?
Turns out it wasn't vanity, it was structural necessity. Well, think about the weight. You're talking about 6 million tons of stone. If those stones are just stacked loosely, or if there are gaps, the weight isn't distributed evenly. You get points of high pressure.
And stones crack. The structure shifts.
And then you have a pile of rubble, not a pyramid. By fitting the stones that tightly, they made sure the weight flowed down through the structure perfectly evenly. It made the pyramid incredibly stable.
I'm looking at the notes. It also mentions earthquakes.
Yes, this is a crucial point. Egypt is in a seismically active zone. Over 4,500 years, that ground has shaken, and shaken violently, many times.
And usually, rigid stone buildings are terrible in earthquakes. They just snap.
Correct. But because these stones are fitted so tightly, but without mortar binding them together, they act as a kind of coupled system. They don't rattle apart, they move together, almost like a solid mountain instead of a stack of bricks. The friction between those perfect joints keeps the whole thing standing.
That's incredible. It's engineering by friction.
Over.
And there's the armor aspect you mentioned before, right?
Right. The outer casing, those smooth, perfectly joined white stones, they acted as a waterproof shell. If you have gaps, rain gets in.
And even in the desert, it does rain.
It does, and sometimes torrentially. And when water gets into limestone and then freezes or heats up, it expands and contracts. It cracks the stone. That's erosion. By sealing the surface so tight a razor blade couldn't get in, they were basically waterproofing the core. They were protecting the heart of the pyramid.
They weren't building for a lifetime. They were building for geologic time.
And the proof is that we're sitting here talking about it.
Perfect.
Even though humans stripped most of the casing stones away to build Cairo, the core is still standing. The joints that are left, they haven't opened up.
That's the part that gets me. 4,500 years of thermal cycling. Hot days, cold nights, expand, contract, and the gaps haven't widened.
It's just humiliating for modern engineers. And here's a fascinating little detail from the source material about our current tech. We're in 2026, right? We have incredible scanning technology. Muon tomography, thermal scanning.
Stuff that lets us see through walls, basically. Find hidden chambers.
Usually, yes. But the source mentions that our current scanning technology actually struggles to resolve the joints in the pyramid because they are too fine.
Wait. The cracks are too small for the scanners to see.
Exactly. The resolution of our best machines isn't high enough to clearly distinguish the density boundary between two stones that were placed by hand 4 millennia ago. To a muon scanner, it just looks like solid rock.
So modern tech can't clearly see what ancient hands built purely by touch.
That is the ultimate irony. We have the computers, they had the copper, and they beat us.
Well, they beat us because they had something that we don't.
Which is
A completely different philosophy of time and of excellence.
Okay, let's get into the philosophy of it, because this is the real deep dive part. This is the invisible stuff.
Think about that stonecutter again, the one we talked about. Sliding block, 847,563 into place.
Right, the guy with the calloused hands and the little copper chisel.
Once that block is set, and the next layer of stones goes on top of it, that perfect joint he just made is gone forever. It's buried inside the pyramid.
No one is ever going to see it. The pharaoh isn't going to check. The architect can't crawl in there. No tourist will ever see it. It's just dark, buried rock.
Exactly. So if he had cut a corner, if he left a gap of a centimeter instead of a millimeter, nobody would have known. He could have finished early. He could have gone home. He could have saved himself hours of just grinding sand against stone.
But he didn't.
He didn't. He worked that stone until it whispered, "Why?"
That is the question. Why care so much about something that's invisible? Why does the quality matter if the audience is zero?
The source calls this the stonecutter's mark. And it's very clear that the mark isn't a signature. It's not a hieroglyph he carved in there. The mark is the precision itself.
So the mark is the fact that there is no mark. It's the absence of error.
It suggests a mindset where excellence is its own reward. The idea that the work itself has a sacred quality. It touches on that whole ancient Egyptian concept of Madikiv truth, balance, cosmic order. To create a perfect joint was to align yourself with the order of the universe.
It's just such a massive contrast to how we operate now. I mean, in the modern world, we're obsessed with good enough.
Oh, absolutely. Minimum viable product, planned obsolescence.
Right.
We build things to last 5 years, maybe 10. If it breaks, you just buy a new one. If the drywall isn't straight, you hang a painting over it.
We optimize for speed and cost. We want it done yesterday, and we want it under budget. They optimize for eternity. They seem to believe that doing something perfectly was more important than doing it easily.
It's a heavy concept. The idea that your integrity is defined by what you do when literally no one will ever see it.
And that integrity is what created a kind of immortality. The source makes this beautiful point, that true immortality isn't about putting your name on something. It lies in crafting something so well that time itself cannot tear it apart.
That stonecutter is long gone. We don't know his name, we don't know anything about his life, but his work, that specific invisible joint, is still holding up the sky.
And in a way, that makes him more immortal than us. We leave behind digital data that rots in a decade. We build condos that leak in 5 years. He left behind a seam that hasn't moved since woolly mammoths were still walking the earth.
It makes you want to go back to your own job, whatever it is you do, and just do it better.
It really does. It's a challenge. It asks us, are we building for next quarter or are we building for the next millennium?
It forces you to ask what your razor blade joint is. What is the thing you're doing today that needs to be perfect, not because someone is watching, but just because it should be?
So as we wrap this up, I'm left thinking about that sound, the whisper.
Stone breathing against stone.
We are still talking about the specific devotion of one stonecutter from 4,500 years ago, just because of the quality of his work. Not his fame, not his wealth, just his work.
Quality is the only thing that beats time.
That is a thought to hold on to. We've looked at the impossible engineering, the simple tools, the seismic resilience, and the profound philosophy behind those razor blade seams. It's been an incredible journey.
But, stop. Before we go any further, we have reached the moment we've been building toward for the last 2 hours. Fact number 1 is the reason this podcast exists. It is the holy grail of this entire subject. Everything we have discussed, from the network to the chemical warfare, all leads to this one final staggering truth. Are you ready? This is the most extraordinary fact of them all.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Today feels different.
It does.
We aren't just looking at another set of facts. This isn't just a routine analysis. We are crossing the finish line of a marathon we've been running together. This is the finale of the Extraordinary 10.
It really does feel momentous. I mean, we've built this whole architecture of knowledge piece by piece.
Yeah.
We've talked about the lost hanging gardens, those dagger blades made from meteorites, the lighthouse.
The lighthouse that sank beneath the waves. Yeah.
But today we're dealing with the heavy hitters.
We have finally reached the summit.
We have.
Everything we've discussed so far has been leading to this one staggering revelation. This is the fact that changes the entire story of the ancient world.
And, I honestly don't think that's an exaggeration.
No.
What we're going to talk about for number 1, it basically rewrites the visual history of the most famous structure on Earth. It turns out what we think we know, what's on the postcard.
Textbooks, everything.
It's just a skeleton. We're looking at a ghost of the real thing.
That is a bold claim, calling the most solid object on the planet a ghost. But, okay, before we get to that reveal, number 1, we have a specific roadmap. First, we need to stop in Cologne, Germany, to uncover a kind of tragedy about lost data.
Right.
And then we're zooming in, microscopically close on the engineering at Giza.
It's a progression, really.
Yeah.
We're moving from the fragility of paper to the impossible permanence of stone, and then finally to the immortality of light.
So let's do it. Fact number 3. This takes us to Cologne, Germany. Now, most people, they know Cologne for the cathedral, right, or the Christmas markets. But in 2018, archaeologists found something underneath a Protestant church that just changes our understanding of Roman literacy.
Right. This was under the Church of St. Antonina. They were digging in the center of what used to be the Colonia Claudiaria Agrippinensium.
Which was a big deal.
Oh, a huge deal. This wasn't some backwater town. This was a provincial capital, a massive hub of Roman power in the north.
And as they dug down, they found walls. But not just any foundation walls. They found a structure about 20 by 9 meters with these really strange rhythmic recesses, niches hollowed into the interior.
Exactly. And at first the team thought, maybe it's a community hall or cupboards for statues or wine. But the dimensions were so specific, about 80 by 50 centimeters.
Okay.
And when they compared the architecture to other famous sites, specifically the Library of Celsus in Ephesus, it all just clicked. These weren't for dishes. They were armarious storage racks for scrolls.
But hang on, how do you make that jump? From holes in the wall to a library, couldn't have just been a really, really organized pantry?
That's the question they had to answer. And the smoking gun was the double wall system. There was this gap of a half a meter between the outer wall and the inner wall with the niches.
Okay.
In Roman architecture, you only do that for one reason: humidity control. They were building an air gap to stop dampness from seeping in and rotting whatever was inside. You don't build a complex HVAC system for wine jars. You do it for parchment and papyrus.
That's fascinating. It's ancient climate control. So let's picture it. We're standing in Cologne. It's the year 150 CE, and we walk into this building. What are we experiencing? I'm guessing it's not a quiet room with a librarian shushing people.
No, it would have been a public space, probably bustling, mosaic floors, maybe marble on the walls, and the smell that would hit you instantly?
What kind of smell?
Cedar oil. They used it to ward off bookworms and preserve the papyrus. That mixed with the smell of leather scroll cases.
And the sunlight streaming in?
It would have been controlled. You'd have light, catching the dust motes in the air, but it would be positioned to avoid direct UV damage to the ink. This was humanity's attempt to centralize knowledge. And based on the number of niches, archaeologists think this place could hold up to 20,000 scrolls.
20,000. Let's put that into perspective. If one scroll is like a modern book chapter, we're talking about a massive database.
It was the pre-digital cloud. Histories of the Germanic wars, legal texts, poetry, philosophy. But here's the twist, and honestly, the tragedy of fact number 3. We found the building. We found the climate control.
What?
We didn't find a single scroll.
Nothing.
Not one. Not a scrap. And this is the difference between Egypt and Germany, In Egypt, the dry sand can preserve papyrus for millennia. But in the damp soil of the Rhineland, organic material just doesn't stand a chance. So we have the hardware, the stone walls, but the software is gone.
It's like, imagine you're a time traveler from the year 2500. You dig up a massive server farm from our time, but it's been sitting in a damp basement. You find the server racks, the cooling fans, the fiber optic cables.
The infrastructure's all there.
Right. But every single hard drive has rusted into nothing.
That is a perfect analogy. You can calculate the terabytes of capacity. Millions of thoughts and arguments and discoveries pass through that room. But you can't access a single byte. It's just silence.
It really highlights how fragile knowledge is. We just assume that because we wrote something down, it's saved. But Cologne proves the container can survive long after the content has decayed.
It's a very sobering thought. We know where the knowledge was, but we have no idea what it was. Entire histories of the Roman frontier, just gone.
Yeah.
All because the storage medium couldn't outlast the building.
Makes you wonder about our own digital dark age, doesn't it? If the power goes out for good, our servers are just useless plastic boxes.
Precisely.
Yeah.
The lesson is that knowledge is actually much more fragile than the buildings we make to house it.
Okay, well, let's move from things that rot to things that definitely do not. We're leaving the fragile library behind and moving to the impossible permanence of the Great Pyramid. This is fact number 2, the stonecutter's mark.
And just to be clear for everyone listening, we're not talking about the size of the pyramid or how many blocks there are. We are zooming way in. We're talking about engineering tolerances.
This is something that I think always gets glossed over. People say the pyramids are precise, but I don't think we really get how precise. We mean the joints between the stones.
Specifically, the outer casing stones and the blocks in the internal chambers. Back in the 1880s, an archaeologist, Sir William Flinders Petrie, did the first truly accurate survey of the Great Pyramid. And he was just stunned. He found the orientation error was tiny, but the joints, that's where it gets baffling.
I've heard that line, you can't fit a razor blade between them. Is that just a tour guide myth, or is it real?
It's completely literal. The gaps were often 1/50th of an inch. And remember, there's no mortar holding these specific joints together. It's just friction and a perfect fit. If you're off by even a millimeter, the stone doesn't sit flush. The weight distribution of millions of tons above it gets unstable.
Okay, but let's talk toolkit. This is the Bronze Age. They don't have hardened steel, no laser levels. They have copper chisels and stone hammers. So how do you cut granite, which is incredibly hard, with copper, which is soft?
That's the classic engineering puzzle. And you're right, copper alone would just bend. The secret was probably the abrasive. They used copper saws, but the cutting agent was sand, quartz sand. The copper tool just rubbed the sand against the stone, grinding it away.
So it's not cutting, it's grinding.
Exactly. An agonizingly slow process. Just imagine you're the stone cutter working on, I don't know, block number 847,563.
Right.
You are grinding a single surface for days, maybe weeks.
Yeah.
You have to match your block perfectly to the one that's already set next to it.
And good enough is not an option.
No. If you're building a mud brick house, close enough is fine.
Yeah.
But when you are building a machine for immortality, close enough is total failure. They used siding rods, what we call boning rods, to check for flatness. They'd coat the stone with red ochre paint, press a flat reference surface against it, and then see where the paint transferred.
And grind down the high spots.
Over and over and over again.
It's the sheer discipline of it that just blows my mind. Why go to all that trouble for joints that, in a lot of cases, were hidden deep inside the structure?
That's the why of excellence, isn't it? They weren't doing it for applause. This is a rejection of entropy itself. They were trying to build something that mirrored the precision of the cosmos.
I mean, if you connect this to the modern world, this level of tolerance is closer to what we expect in, like, optics or aerospace engineering, not masonry. It's like building the Empire State Building, but insisting every window frame fits with the precision of a telescope lens.
And doing it with hand tools, under a burning sun, for 20 years. The stonecutter's mark isn't a signature carved in the rock. The mark is the invisible seam. It's the silence of two stones meeting so perfectly that air can't even get between them.
True immortality is crafting something so well that time itself can't tear it apart. That's the takeaway. And here's the pivot. Even the most perfect stone can be stripped away.
Which brings us to the moment we've been waiting for.
The summit.
Fact number 1.
The immortal facade.
Let's set the scene. When you, listening right now, think of the pyramids, what's the image that comes to your mind?
Sandy. Brown. Rugged. They look like giant steps. They look like ruins. They kind of blend in with the desert.
Right, because what we're looking at is the core. We're looking at the rough structural guts of the pyramid. But fact number 1 is that originally, the Great Pyramid was completely sheathed in Tura limestone.
Tura limestone. Okay, let's get specific. What's the difference between that and the blocks we see today?
The core blocks are local. They're yellowish, rough, full of fossils. Tura limestone was quarried from across the Nile, deep underground. It is fine-grained, pure white, and hard enough to take a polish.
A polish. So we're not just talking about white rock.
No.
We're talking about a mirror finish.
A mirror finish. And I really want you to try and visualize this because the physics of it are just overwhelming. Close your eyes for a second. We're back in the desert, 2500 BCE. It's high noon. You look toward the horizon. You don't see a brown mountain. You see a geometric beam of light.
It would have been blinding.
Literally blinding. The angle of the slope, 51 degrees, it was designed to reflect sunlight. From a distance, the pyramids wouldn't have looked like they were made of stone. They would have looked like they were glowing from within. Mountains of light.
And we have to talk about the capstone, the pyramidion.
The very peak. We have evidence suggesting it was plated in electrum, a natural alloy of gold and silver.
Oh.
So you have this massive polished white surface, 480 feet high, capped with a gold tip that catches the very first ray of the morning sun before the valley floor even sees the light.
It's a beacon.
It's a second sun. And think about the geography. During the flood season, the Nile waters came much, much closer to the Giza Plateau. That water would have been a mirror, so you'd see the white pyramid rising up,
Yeah.
and its perfect reflection going down into the water.
Double the light.
Double the light.
It just changes everything about how I picture ancient Egypt. We think of it as this beige, dusty old place. But this was high contrast. White stone, green palm trees, blue water, a gold peak. It was vibrant.
It was a machine. It was designed to announce the divinity of the pharaoh. It shouted, "I am here and I am eternal," in a way that you could see from miles and miles away.
So, where is it? How do you lose 20 acres of polished white casing stones?
Well, it stood like that for thousands of years. But in 1303 CE, a massive earthquake shook the region. It cracked a lot of the casing stones and loosened them. And at that time, Cairo was expanding. The Bahri Sultan An-Nasir Hassan, he looked at the pyramids and he didn't see a wonder. He saw a quarry.
A pre-cut Home Depot.
Exactly. Why quarry fresh stone when you have all this high-quality polished limestone just sitting there for the taking?
Right.
They stripped the casing stones to build the mosques and fortifications of Cairo. If you go visit the mosque of Sultan Hassan today, you are looking at the skin of the Great Pyramid.
That is devastating. It's like finding a Ferrari in a junkyard, just the chassis, and realizing the engine and the bodywork are now part of a fence down the street.
It's cultural vandalism. But to them, it was just pragmatic recycling. And here's the analogy I always come back to. Imagine if we decided to tear apart the Sistine Chapel. Imagine we just chipped off all that plaster with Michelangelo's paintings, because we needed some lime to patch a crack in an apartment building.
You'd have the bones of the chapel, brick ceiling, but the poetry would just be gone.
That is exactly what happened. We have the skeleton, we lost the poetry.
But you called this fact the immortal facade, which implies something survived.
It did. The stone is gone, but the idea is indestructible. And the shift in meaning is fascinating. Today, we see a tomb. The ancients saw a celestial object. But because we know about the Tura limestone, because we have the archaeology, we can reconstruct it in our minds.
It's the survival of wonder.
Precisely. Immortality isn't about staying the same physically. It's about staying meaningful while you transform. The pyramids have been holy sites. Then they were quarries. Then they were romantic ruins for Victorian travelers. Now they're scientific puzzles for us.
They keep evolving.
They do. As long as we can stand in that desert today, look at those rough brown steps, and know that they used to blaze white. They are still shining. The human audacity to build mountains of light. That's the real wonder, not the rock itself.
The facade is still there as long as we keep the memory of it alive.
Yeah.
That is the perfect place to land this. That was fact number 1, the absolute pinnacle of our countdown. We hope this journey through the ancient world has changed how you see the world today.
And to you, the listener.
Yeah.
Thank you for spending this time with us. If you're still listening, you are part of that small group of superfans who truly value deep dive knowledge, and we are so honored to have you in our community.
If you enjoyed this session, please subscribe to join our daily journey, share this episode with someone who loves a mystery, and tell us in the comments which fact blew your mind the most. We read every single one.
We'll be back tomorrow with another countdown of the most magnificent facts in existence. Until then, stay curious, and thanks for listening to the Extraordinary 10 podcast.